Welcome to episode number 8, and we are handling the objections to a world that is best for all in the Self-Perfected podcast. So I think this is going to be the best episode so far. I know it is, because this is going to be awesome. I was really looking forward to this one. And what we did in the Self-Perfected group is we asked people to place their objections to a world that is best for all. And even if it wasn't that they actually personally believed in the objection, if they could come up with it, just put it. So some of these you might be listening to them and saying, why would someone think that? But everyone's just coming up with whatever they could think of as to being, possible reason why we can't have a world that's best for all. So what we're going to do today is we're just going to kind of jump into it, read some of them and answer it. So it'll be kind of like one of those, answering questions videos you see on YouTube or whatever, but we'll do it with this particular context. So which one do you guys want to start with? I'm just kind of scrolling through them right now.
I think we should start with that one that you put in the chat, the one that you highlighted.
Really?
Yeah, I think we should start with that. Who decides what is best?
Do you want to read it? I don't see where it is.
Who decides what is best for all? Opinions might widely differ. Or also, so we got a few questions that are around this, right?
Okay,
so
read through this.
I'll read through all these, and we can basically just talk about all of it in context. Someone says contrast brings awareness, right? Someone says, who decides what is best for all? Opinions might widely differ. Someone else says, who chooses what's best for all? If people are not educated, they could be manipulated into believing that any crazy shit is best for all or required for the safety of people, as an example. And then also that their fear is the reduction of freedom. Okay, so that's kind of going into something else there. But really, who decides what is best for all? And someone also is saying the world is already perfect or best for all. And we only see 1,000% or even less. How can you be sure what to do if we ourselves are not perfect?
Let's come back to that one, because that goes into the next, if you look at that next paragraph, or I guess it's the continuing that paragraph. What if we're already in a world that's best for all?
Yeah.
Let's talk about who decides what is best for all. Because this one, I think, is the biggest objection. It's the main one when I talk to people. Anytime you bring the conversation to a point where you're like, okay, well, we have to consider what's best here. Not even in the context of changing the world, just in the context of what that person is doing that is affecting other people. They tend to go back to this objection of, well, how do you know what's best? How can you say what's best for everybody? Right. And so it's kind of using on the one hand, it's playing into a person's fear and desire not to be perceived like a dictator, like somebody in history that's really evil or something like that, that's trying to control everybody, because we all know that's bad. So there's kind of it's like in sales, you'll have these ways you handle objections where it plays into something so the person will just let it go. And it's kind of like that. It's like playing into that fear of the person to back down of okay, well, you're right. I can't tell you what's best for you. I mean, you have your opinion, I have my opinion, which is what this person is saying, right? Opinions might widely differ. And again, we know, for those of you who put the questions in the group, we know that a lot of these are just hypothetical. So don't feel like we're thinking you're stupid or something for asking it. Although some of these, from a common sense perspective, are actually stupid. Okay, so if you actually do believe this, well, I'll let you feel how you want about that. But what do you guys think about this? Who decides what is best for all? How would you handle that objection? Because I have obviously my perspective on it, but I want to hear what you guys have to say.
Yeah. Go ahead, Mitch. Go ahead.
No, okay. I'll go. No, I'm kidding. Mitch, I want to hear Mitch. Go ahead.
Well, best for all, I see it a lot when we talk about equality, right? Like creating equal opportunity for everyone. We want a world where equality is prevalent. There's a difference between equal opportunity and equal outcome. So equal opportunity means we all have access to the best for us, where equal outcome would be everyone's got to fit into this cookie cutter mold. So when we talk about best for all, how this really started to click with me is that everyone has access to the best. We're all on the same playing field. It's like the best starting point. That means every kid's got basic needs met. Everyone has access to an effective education and enough food and shelter and things like that. It doesn't mean then we have to force people into doing specific kind of things. Rather, the best platform that we can all create so that everyone has common sense stuff like clean water, quality food, a real education. That is the basic and best starting point. And that's, from my perspective, what's best for all. But I know I have a long way to go with understanding this.
Okay. What about you, Jay?
I would say from what I see is what's best for all. Who decides? We all decide. I think we can all decide on what's practically best. We've talked about this, I'm sure, on previous podcasts. And if not, well, we've definitely talked about it a lot before. But as far as like, practically speaking, what's best when it comes to clean drinking water? Is it best to have clean drinking water or dirty, like not potable drinking water? There's an obvious, clear answer. And when we're talking about what's best, we're talking about what's best within that context of, okay, let's just look at what you need in order to survive, and not just survive, but actually survive healthily. You're doing well, what you need in order to do that. And then to do well in society, you're going to need just some basic things that would be best to have, and to have the best of it. And there's an example that you put before, Cameron, about, there's a best way to go about doing something. Like, if a part in your car breaks down, there's a best way to fix it. You could fix it with duct tape, potentially, right? But it would probably be better if you get the actual piece for that part, or for that, whatever it is in your car. I don't know a lot about cars, but if you get the actual piece for it and you put that in where it's supposed to go, that would be best, rather than just using some duct tape, slapping it together. And it might run, but that's not best. And so as far as who decides what's best, I think everyone would be able to see that as, yeah, clearly, if I could have it this way, that's the way that I would want it. I think a lot of people limit themselves within what's already here, and using that as a way to say, well, maybe I can't afford that part. Maybe I can't, get that thing. And so what would be best for me is if I just use duct tape. But that's accepting the limitation, as opposed to actually considering what is best, and then trying to create that.
I think we actually addressed that point you just said about people looking at what's here already and kind of accepting that as this is just the way it has to be. I think we talked about that on the last episode, if I'm not mistaken. But I think both of you gave really cool answers. I would push back a little bit, Mitch, on the point you brought up of having to choose between equality of outcome and equality of opportunity. Mm-hmm. And the only reason why is because those are both terms that are used by political right and left respectively. I think I got that the right order, right? And so the problem is, if you say equality of opportunity is important, people will say, well, everyone already has an equal opportunity. Now, is that self-honest though?
Yeah,
because like you pointed out, you said it yourself, it's like you have to have equal education too, right? Well, everyone already has an equal opportunity for an education.
Yeah, no, that isn't real education. That's
right.
Accepting the box.
Exactly. So if you have parents who don't give you an effective vocabulary, don't have an effective vocabulary themselves, you're already at a disadvantage. You do not have an equal opportunity as somebody else whose parents had effective vocabulary, whether they had money or not, just that point alone. And there's a variety of factors that go into it. So I would say we have to then be totally honest about, is the opportunity actually equal, or is it we're just saying it is? So that's the only issue I have with the statement. It's not that I don't agree with it. But then on the side of opportunity of outcome, or equal outcome rather, wouldn't that just be equal outcome? If everything is considered, wouldn't the outcome be the same from the perspective of principle? The problem is people think outcome means I have to wear a blue shirt because blue shirt has been decided to be best. So only people can wear blue shirts. Well, that's actually a preference, most likely, isn't it? Mm-hmm. Like most likely what color of a shirt you wear is a matter of preference. Now, the reason I say most likely is because maybe if you really investigate, the only way you can get this one particular shade of blue as a shirt is if you destroy this rainforest over here or something like that, because that pigment comes from this particular, so in that particular specific example, I would be like, well, in that case, can we see for some, the way reality is set up right now, we can only, if everybody wants to wear that shirt, that wouldn't be best. So that preference doesn't make sense. Now, if you think about it from the perspective of preference, okay, you also have to consider, where do your preferences come from, right? So you might like that particular shade of blue, but it's because of some particular memory or association you have with it. That aside, none of us are advocating for a world where a dictator tells everybody what color of shirt they can or can't have. Even if having a certain shirt does mean the destruction of a rainforest, what we're talking about is everybody could see for themselves that doesn't make sense. And nobody therefore wants to wear that color of t-shirt because of the consequence, not because they're being forced to. So that's only possible, though, if everybody has an effective information processing ability. So when I look at equality of outcome, the outcomes would be more like what, you mentioned it too, Mitch, but like what Drake was specifically addressing, which is you can agree on, would it be best for everybody to know every word and the definition of every word? Because if not, then okay, what words and what people shouldn't know certain words and stuff. Like, in other words, like, wouldn't it make sense that every single human being knew everything about reality?
Yeah.
That's an equal outcome, but that gives them the equal opportunity to participate in reality as equals. Does it mean two people are going to do exactly the same thing? No, because our bodies are physically different. We're going to have different preferences based on the physical setup of our body. Some of those are because of consequences over time. And so it's more of like, that's just the way it is now. And that is a thing we have to accept. Some of it may be something that we can challenge and change about ourselves depending on the circumstance. But really what we're talking about is from the perspective of principles. So the outcome would be, okay, we want everybody to have the best education. We want everybody to have clean drinking water, proper shelter, all of these basic points that anybody could agree on. And the other thing too is when you look at who can decide what is best, it's like when someone complains about the politicians or anything for that matter, aren't they always like looking at it from the perspective of what they're doing versus what they think should be done? Right. Yeah. But the problem is when we have the idea that everyone's allowed to have their own opinion. Now, I know immediately that's going to trigger a lot of people into going, oh, whoa, that is a dictatorship. No one's allowed to have an opinion. That just means you want the dictator to determine what everyone's opinion is, or, the one opinion that you're allowed to have. But let me put it this way. Is there a difference between understanding reality and having an opinion about something?
Yeah.
So if everyone understood reality, what would be the purpose of an opinion?
I think you're going to have to explain that more.
Yeah. Do you have an example?
Okay. What color is this banana?
Yellow.
Okay. Do you like bananas?
Yes.
Okay. Do you like to eat bananas?
Yes.
Okay. If bananas made you sick, would you eat them?
No.
Even if you liked them?
I wouldn't eat it.
Okay.
Yeah.
So somebody might say, I would. Okay. Let's say your kid liked bananas, but it made them sick. Would you let them eat them?
No.
Okay. But your kid's like, but that's my opinion. I like bananas.
Yeah, I understand that, but
do they have a right to their opinion?
I mean, they can like bananas.
Yeah, they can like the banana, but it should be explained to them why it's not best, and so, until they actually understand it and can make that decision.
Should that parent be allowed to give it to their child? Logically, not saying should a government come and force them to not do it. I'm saying, should the parent make the decision not to give it to their child?
The parent should make the decision not to give it to their child.
So are sick. Okay, so but you both agreed, like, okay, but we shouldn't like not let them have the opinion,
right?
But we also agree that the parent shouldn't let the kid have the banana,
right?
Okay, so just think of yourself as your own parent. Why would you treat your child differently than yourself? Okay, so can you determine for yourself, if you're looking at things clearly, okay, this is best for me to have or not? Now your opinion might be, but I really like bananas. Okay, but is it best for you to have the banana?
Not if it's gonna cause you harm, no.
So, but if you say that to me, I'd say, oh, hey man, I have the right to my opinion. Come on, I have the right to my opinion. It's like, okay, but that doesn't change the common sense that if it's making you sick, it's not best for you to have it. Right. I'm not forcing you to either have it or not have it. It's you choosing to do what is best for yourself based on the common sense. Now, maybe it's the banana could be cooked a certain way or cleaned a certain way, and it doesn't make you sense. So there's a lot of specifics, and it's just a general broad idea, right? But my point is, the opinion can be separated from the reality, and the decisions should be made on reality. Doesn't mean you can't have the opinion, but what's the value of the opinion in that context?
The value of the opinion is only that you get whatever, you get this emotional positive feeling of, ooh, I like the banana, so I eat the banana.
That's
right.
True.
And what are the odds that if, like, think about this, a banana, it's like, well, think about this. Like, you have companies that make products that have no nutritional value whatsoever, that are just pure sugar and chemicals and stuff like that, that kids love to eat.
Mm-hmm.
But should we, as a society, be okay with that?
No, not at all.
You see what I mean?
Yeah.
So it may be difficult, I think, maybe just from my explanation so far, people to see, like, how does that have to do with opinions? But if you go back and listen to the episode we did on God, it's the same point. If I say, my opinion is that when I die, I go to heaven. So no matter what I do on earth, it doesn't matter. Okay. So whatever politician says they're the same religion as me, I'm going to vote for them, no matter what they actually do.
Yeah.
Does that affect my life? Does that affect other people?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Does that opinion make sense as a valid opinion for people to hold? You see, it has physical consequences in our life. Now, I know, again, people are going to say, oh, you're saying people should not be allowed to have certain opinions. No, I'm saying, does the common sense dictate that the person themselves, if they're being honest with themselves and applying proper common sense, they should realize for themselves, this doesn't make sense.
Yeah.
Okay. If it's going to affect my physical reality, and it's going to affect other people's physical reality in a way that's less than best, then what is the value of it? Because what we'll find if we actually examine where our opinions come from is they come from preferences and things being imposed on us by the world, media, education, etc., and by our parents. They're not actually things that we have ever looked at and examined and actually said, this is something I want to accept. Because otherwise, what are you forced to admit? Like, no, I have opinions that I examined all of my opinions, and some of them produce outcomes that are physically, you can show measurably, are not best for everybody, but I'm still choosing to have them because I have that right. I mean, isn't that kind of like being a psychopath? We would, you know what I mean? Like, so what does everyone say when you say, well, everyone has a right to their opinion, right? Like, everyone agrees to this, yes?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And then they say, but what?
As long as it doesn't hurt anyone.
Right. I think everyone can agree with that. Like, can anyone who's watching this, just ask yourself, do you agree everyone has a right to their opinion without any but, as long as it doesn't harm anyone?
Yeah.
Like, who would accept the statement, just everyone has a right to their opinion no matter what?
Well, no, then you'd have chaos.
Yeah.
Well, right. So, okay, well, as long as it doesn't hurt anybody. Okay, well, what does it mean to hurt somebody then? Like, what does that physically, practically mean? And wouldn't you have to understand reality to be able to determine if it's actually hurting you or not? Do you see where I'm going with that, right?
Yeah.
So it's, again, this isn't about, hey, Asif, this isn't about we should impose opinions or not, or not allow certain opinions. It's about, if everyone or an individual can process information clearly, they can see for themselves whether their opinion is going to be, in terms of the outcome of it, in terms of how they're going to live their life based on it, and what they're going to expect from others, if that's actually going to produce an outcome that's best or not. Would you agree if everyone did that, then there wouldn't be any discussion about should we have a world that's best? It would automatically be best. You see, because no one's accepting less than that, right? So I think that really brings us to the next point, which is, well, how do we ensure that everybody's able to do that? And that's why we're not just here talking, like, it's just not a philosophy podcast. We're talking about real solutions. We're talking about DIP. We're talking about technotutor. These are the tools that are going to allow an individual to develop that type of self-awareness and that type of ability to see reality directly. And in no part of any of those things is there any part that says, you must believe this, you must not believe that. It's simply tools to allow you to develop self-awareness and understanding of reality through seeing it for yourself, right? That way you can decide for yourself. That way you can see the point for yourself. But I think what's even more interesting is if we look at that same thing in the document, that same where that quote came from, or that we were reading the question, it's the person said, my fear is also the reduction of freedom that could come from someone imposing what is best or deemed as best under a certain context.
Yeah.
So can you see, like, that's the point that I'm addressing right now, which is no one, we're not talking about anyone imposing anything. That wouldn't be best. That's not the world I want. I don't want anyone to impose anything on me, and vice versa.
Yeah.
But if I went around saying, well, you know what, guys, since no one's imposing anything on me, I'm just going to become a murderer. Haha. What are you going to do about that? Would y'all be okay with that? No. So we have to also look practically at, okay, what is acceptable and what's not? Collectively, what are we going to accept as okay? But then you have to ask yourself, why would somebody want to do that? Clearly, there's some screws loose.
Yeah.
You need some support. That person needs to be isolated temporarily and supported to be able to not harm anybody. Like you wouldn't allow that person to harm you if you were that person, and so forth, right?
Yeah, to an extent, I think we addressed this in our previous podcast where we were talking about, okay, so you don't believe that you can be perfect. All right, so then at what point should you stop? At what point do you think like, okay, let's stop improving, right?
Exactly.
It's the same thing in our society where we've already determined it's not best to kill somebody else, right? Or at least to have murderers running around.
Now,
right?
okay, hold on real quick. How does everyone know it's not best for people to kill people?
Well, that's a good question. How do they?
Because there's some people who believe, like, if you don't believe in God, then you'll just run around killing people. But there are people who don't believe in God and they don't do that. And they're not saying they don't do it because of God. And they're not like, well, you know, I never thought about that. Why don't I do? That's not what's happening.
Why don't I just go out and murder someone?
Right. But wouldn't you guys agree with me? Like, we can all agree it's not best to do it.
Right.
And therefore that's common sense.
It's you wouldn't want it done unto you.
Right. But would you agree that's just common sense? Like, I don't need to be like, well, because God said so.
Yeah.
Oh, right.
It's just, it's common sense. It's not best. Like, we're not going to do it.
Yeah.
So there's already one point we can all agree on. Is it best for children to have proper nutrition?
Yeah, for sure.
Clearly.
100%.
That's common sense. How do you know? Because God said so? Is it just obvious? Like, you know, and like, maybe you really can't see it. You know, and there's going to be that person who's like, well, I mean, you know, how do you know that this one child, you know, just, they don't want to have proper nutrition and that they really need to drink arsenic all day? You're like, okay, well, when that actually exists, let's talk about it. Okay, because if hypothetically somebody needed arsenic for their body to function, then it would make sense for them to do it. But if the result is they get sick and die, then clearly that's not really what we're talking about, is it?
Right.
Right. So we can have common sense here. And that's the issue, is if people don't have, it's not common, is it?
Yeah.
Right. And opinions get in the way of that, because an opinion is special to you. So when everyone has a right to their own opinion, how can there be common sense?
Right.
You see what I mean? Common sense is what we can all agree on if we're being honest, and if we can see the consequences, you know, like we talked about in that On God podcast and probably other ones, that episode rather, where it's like, okay, look at what you believe, look at what that implies, look at what that implies, look what that implies, and what's that going to create?
Yeah.
And so what happens is we're placing much more value on the imaginative aspects of reality, which is where your opinions exist, versus the physical aspects of reality. So we would rather give rights to this part, the imaginary part, than the physical part. But it really should be the other way around. Like the physical should determine what makes sense for you to imagine, right?
Yeah.
And this is why, for example, things like pornography and so forth, it's not that they should be outlawed per se, but if you're clear within yourself and you have common sense, you'll realize it's not best for you, because it makes it virtually impossible to have a real relationship of intimacy. There's a lot of other reasons why, but that alone, like, you can't have a clear, effective relationship if you're doing that, because it puts more emphasis on an imaginary realm where you're doing all this over here. In real life, there's too much contrast. It's not real. You're not going to get that out of it, right? We could probably do a whole episode just on that, right?
Yeah.
But really, the point is, we're not advocating that anyone impose anything. Now, on an individual basis, if a person was refusing to, like, if literally there was a person hanging out with you, and there's like you and your 5 of your friends, and one other person, they're like, I'm going to start murdering you guys right now unless you stop me, what would you do?
Lock them up.
we'd have to.
You stop them. You do whatever you could to stop them.
Yeah.
And obviously you'd be like, well, I don't see any reason to just immediately pull out a gun and kill them. But
Right.
if I can prevent them from doing it and then stop them and help them understand why not to, that would be better than just killing them.
Yeah.
Right. But I'm saying you have to look at things within common sense. So this is not about morality. This is about common sense.
I think
right? And so, yeah.
That's a really good point that you bring up, is that oftentimes as soon as you start talking about what's best, it's people want to just go to the philosophical and just consider like all the things that are like far out on the far reaches of what they can imagine, as opposed to actually considering reality, you know? And then when you bring it back to reality, everyone's like, oh yeah, well, that's common sense. But they argue for the imagination. They argue for that thing that doesn't even exist.
Right.
Just because
it's a hypothetical, isn't it?
It's a hypothetical, but they also see that as their freedom of expression. Like you could potentially be taking, you know, their freedom if, you know, down the road they want to, I don't know, drink arsenic or whatever for their pleasure.
Well, and think about this too. Like if we're saying that you have to re-examine your opinions, and because if a person has a quote opinion that ultimately leads to an outcome that's best, that's not an issue, is it? It's not about opinions per se. Of course, when you understand what an opinion really is, you realize you just don't actually know what an opinion is, which is why you're arguing for it. But in other words, to have a perspective or a viewpoint, there's nothing wrong with perspectives and viewpoints, but an opinion is actually something very specific.
Can you explain that?
Well, meaning an opinion is actually a decision that you've made or that you're operating from, which is tied together with emotions and images and associations. It's not based on sound logic. It's just like something you're accepting that you just never questioned.
And to be more specific, it's not just not based off sound logic. It's not based off proof or evidence.
Right, exactly. So what I wanted to ask, just, I don't know if there's much that we can talk about here, but I wanted to just ask, because when I look at this statement, who decides what is best for all? Opinions may widely differ. What would be two differing opinions that would not allow a world to be best for all? I'm trying to think for myself, like what would they be?
How about the opinion of like more conservative or more liberal values? So like,
see, but that's so vague though.
mm-hmm.
Right? But really, when you take it down, conservative versus liberal, it's exactly what you said earlier: equality of outcome versus equality of opportunity. Right? Mm-hmm. And then if you take in terms of what liberal and conservative mean in our general context right now, I know that's not the technical definition of those words, but that's generally what everyone accepts they mean by liberal and conservative. But if you, like, we already took that part apart. See what I mean? Like, here's an example that just came to mind: being a Christian versus like Muslim.
Yeah.
Well, would that imply that if Christians and Muslims exist, and not just those two only, but, you know, just basically you can have whatever religion you want, that has some kind of consequences on earth that aren't best?
Yeah.
Like,
if
that's the example that's used, which I think we can agree, like, oh yeah, somebody would use that because you can't do what's best because everyone should have that freedom, right? Okay, fine. But then wouldn't it imply that the very existence of two different religions creates conflict, which makes the world not best?
Yeah.
So then the question would have to be, right. So then the question would have to be, why isn't each person who's adhering to that religion questioning what they believe and therefore questioning their application of what they believe they have to accept in order to practice that religion? And what's their starting point within it? And why are they doing it? And all of that.
Yeah.
So would the solution be to outlaw religion? No, like that doesn't make sense. The solution would be support every single person to develop an effective vocabulary so they can look at a religion and be like, hey, I kind of like this expression, but I realize I'm going to do certain points within it because it'll make it the world best for everybody. And the parts that are harmful, I'm not going to do those.
Yeah.
And if you're going to hide behind, well, I could have whatever freedom of expression I want, therefore I can do harmful things, we already agree, like that's not acceptable. Mm-hmm. So you can't give something like religion or whatever a special status to be able to get away. Like, you wouldn't allow someone to have a religion where literally they believe they can just murder anybody they want. We would all say, hold on, that's a limit. You're not allowed to do that. So you have to examine your religion, your beliefs, whatever they are. And so opinion is just another word for religion, isn't it? It's just not a formalized, like you can copy it to another person and here's the rules and here's the songs and all that stuff. It's just, it's my religion. These are my sets of beliefs that I hold within me. But so if you go and examine all those and you look at what of these actually is causing me to act in ways or accept the world in ways that aren't best, and then not accept those things or do those things anymore, then there wouldn't be anything wrong with whatever else is retained from that. But if a person would say, well, you don't have a right to do that. Like, you can't require me to do that because I have a right to practice whatever religion I want. It's like, so what are you not willing to investigate then? What are you not willing to give up? Are you admitting within yourself that there are elements within what you believe that are causing harm in the world? And if there aren't, then why not make sure? But my point about opinions, though, is you have to understand your opinions did not come from you already sitting down and mapping everything out and questioning it. When did you ever do that? No. At one point, when you became a certain age as a child, you just started having opinions and you never thought about where they come from. They're either your parents did it or you're reacting to what your parents did, and most of the time, or it's from something that you saw on TV and stuff like that, right? So I think that really, I just wanted to put some context for the point about opinions. What do you guys think about this context? The world is already perfect, best for all. We see only 0.001% or even less. How can you be sure what to do? If ourselves are not perfect, how can we make something perfect? And then it says, what if we're already in a world that's best for all? Maybe the current system is necessary to create the optimal spiritual evolution for humanity. I'm going to stop it right there because there's a lot in that one, because they're kind of two separate things. But first of all, are we in agreement the world's not already perfect, or?
I'm in agreement with that.
Yeah.
Okay. So I don't even know. It's like we only see a little tiny.
They mean like something to do with right now, these are the conditions that would eventually get us to a world that's best.
Okay. Which is kind of like what that second part is saying.
Yeah, exactly.
Like maybe the current system is necessary to create the spiritual evolution. Yeah, I agree. Yeah. That's why we're here. That's why we're doing what we're doing. But if you think that because things are the way they are to get us to the next point, therefore we don't have to take responsibility within ourselves, then actually that isn't what's occurring right now. Because actually whatever circumstances are in the world, it's causing you to think you don't need to take responsibility for yourself. That's actually the next part of our evolution.
That's such a big point right there.
Yeah. I'm seeing now like the fallacies within just people's processing ability, because within this, I'm seeing you're talking about the difference of opinion of equality of outcome and equality of opportunity, right? And one says, well, we've already got equal opportunity, right? So we already have that. But if you don't have equal education, which is equality of outcome, then how can you take advantage of all those opportunities equally, right? But, there's the argument of, well, okay, so we have to have one or the other. Like, no, we can have both, And if you're looking at, well, if we force everyone to have an equal outcome, that's communism, but that's not giving everyone an equal opportunity as well. And so it's almost believing you have to have it one way or the other, and not even considering in a practical sense. They might have like a hypothetical idea of, oh, well, we just need to figure out a way to make those things work together. But no, actually, let's consider it. Like, what are the good things of this? What are the good things of that? Why don't we put those things together? It doesn't have to be, oh, you have to accept all of this or accept all of that. Actually investigate it and keep what is good, right? And then what the statement that we just made here with, okay, we could say that the circumstances are perfect for creating who you are. But generally speaking, when people go into the world is already perfect the way that it is, as in, we're going to evolve into something else, then they don't take responsibility because they're like, no, it's happening. It's happening. The world is perfect in its imperfection and it is okay. It's like, whoa, no, that means you actually have to grow. and it's not
But
just going to happen to you.
Notice we asked, what are the objections to a world that's best for all?
Mm-hmm.
And somebody says, what if the world's already perfect? Okay, look, the world is perfect. Okay, perfection's a program. Perfection is when you can predict the outcome. Okay, if you create a computer program and then you run it, you know it's going to do what it was programmed to do. But what we're asking is the program that's running best? See, that's different. So why are we not just calling this the perfection podcast? It's self-perfection. Because what's occurring is that no one is taking responsibility for themselves to do what is best. And therefore everything we're allowing in this world is everything is automated to do what is less than best. And people benefit in different ways from that. Is that clear? So I'm not arguing about, even though that's the quote we read because that's the way it was written, I'm not arguing that the world is perfect or isn't perfect or anything. We're talking about whether it's best or not. Because when you talk about perfection, that's when the opinions can come in. Well, what does it mean to be perfect? I mean, maybe it is perfect. It's like, okay, is it best? Because, if you ask a person, is the world best? Do you think they're going to be like, yes? No, they're going to be like, well, I mean, maybe. They're going to hesitate because everyone knows that it's not. Okay, so let's ask if you want to choose one of those things to talk about. I think you had one you wanted to bring up.
There was that one that we were just talking about of, aren't we already in a world that's best for all? And they go on to say, not that we don't have our challenges, of course. In the more practical sense, I think a world where no matter the cards you are dealt, you have the opportunity, resources, and learning available to make the life you determine to be best for yourself. A personal level of self-awareness of what really is best for you is important here too, though. Sorry, the words are a little bit. There's also something to be said of the journey to becoming your best self as well. It's not a journey you can force everyone to take.
Okay.
It's like,
yeah, can you turn your mic down a little bit, just like slightly? Okay, I think
Drake's back.
Yeah. Okay, but yeah, go ahead, take that one on. That's because it's going further into that quote we were working on.
It seems like this one's interpreting that somebody else other than that person is going to be responsible for creating a world that's best. As in, I'm saying it's only going to happen through your self-awareness, through you on your journey to becoming the best self, and then creating our world and our environment, the things that we take as givens, which are not givens, to actually support the individual becoming the best version of themselves.
That's a really cool point because I haven't read through all of these yet, and I'm seeing that point in here. It's like they're assuming that you have, it's like almost like assuming, well, if you create a world that's best, people are going to still have to have personal self-awareness of what's best for them.
Yeah, and they're like, and which group of people are we going to elect that are going to be responsible for the choice of what's best? It's like,
right.
Oh, I see where you're.
But think about it like this: like if you were born into an environment where your parents never had to stress about money ever, and not only didn't have to stress about money, like they had enough, like no one ever had to stress. So there was never any subconscious reason to ever fear anyone, like ever. Wouldn't your life have taken a totally different course? I mean, even the options that you see, like, okay, well, I have to either go to trade school or go to university. That's what I have to do with my life. Like, you would have infinitely more choices as to what you could do with your life, just from the perspective of what you would do for your occupation or your, at that point, it wouldn't even be about what you do for money. It would be like, how do you want to express yourself and what do you want to contribute to this world? And so think about like the idea of give as you want to receive, right? So that's like the principle from Christianity. It's in other religions too. Other philosophers have talked about this. How can you give as you want to receive if the starting point of your experience is you have to survive? In other words, you're just trying to get enough for yourself all the time. You're never actually able to give. And so the only way you're able to give is just by participating in the system that's by design making it so you never have enough. So that's our way of giving to each other right now. It's just, we're just all trying to survive. We're just literally all trying to take so that we can exist. But if the starting point was we were to engineer a system that didn't restrict our thoughts, it didn't restrict our opinions or any of that stuff. Like, in other words, just remove the idea of a dictator telling you what to think or believe or any of that stuff. But it simply made sure that you had what you needed. Like, if like a computer could look at you and go, here's all the things you physically need, like based on your genetics, your physical makeup, your oxygen intake, your lung capacity, like everything you need. Let's make sure you get all those things. You see what I mean? Not a person deciding it based on their opinions about you, but actually physically it can measure that. Then it's like, what would you ever have to worry about? Now, that's not going to happen tomorrow. So anybody who's like, well, I mean, to be able to create something like that would be, you're trying to think about it in terms of
you would have
what
to get
exists.
people to focus on creating
Right.
these things.
We're not even suggesting that this is going to happen in 10 years. That's not the point. The point is, if we never focus on it, it's never going to happen. And it can probably happen a lot more quickly than we realize. And it can also happen in phases. Like, if we even just took care of the point of everybody had enough money, like in the world, to get what they need every day, that alone would take care of a majority of the problems that we take for granted. You see what I mean? And then over time, we'd have generations that are born into environments where they don't have the same stresses and the same beliefs about reality. And therefore, they could make new changes that we don't even know are possible right now. It seemed like you wanted to say something, Asa.
No, I was just going to play devil's advocate in the moment.
Go
and be
for
like,
it.
well,
That's the whole point of this. Yeah.
What problems, Cameron? What are you
Yeah.
you saying that just everybody having enough money is going to what? Do what?
Yeah, well, you won't have to worry about money. But think about it.
Okay, but how's that going to help how's that going to help racism?
How's it going to help racism?
That's easy
Yeah.
though.
Reparations.
Yeah.
Isn't
Not-
that what
not
everybody
really.
wants, right? Go ahead, Drake. Yeah.
Not only that, it's like we have a class system
Yeah.
because not everyone has the same amount of money, or not necessarily the same amount, but they don't have enough to meet their needs. Then there creates this class system where, okay, these are the have-nots and these are the haves, and those class systems very much run along the lines of race because of the history of, well, in this country anyway, you know.
Also, isn't the whole problem with, I mean, it's not the only problem with racism, but the major thing that's discussed is that, let's just talk about America. The argument is that Black people in America are disadvantaged because of racism. Okay. If everyone had enough money, would anybody have to go into the police based on that's the only thing they could do?
No.
Okay. So that alone, we could decide who's a police officer, not based on any economic reasons, but just based on who would actually be able to do this job effectively.
Yeah.
Now, if everybody had enough money, would anybody want to have people in the police that are going to protect their property? Because the purpose of the police is to protect property. It's not to protect life, it's to protect property. Okay. So where is police brutality coming from? It's disproportionately, that's the statement, affecting people who are disadvantaged in terms of property. Because the Black people in America came from, by and large, through the slavery route, right? Therefore, they'd be disadvantaged in all those ways. If before slavery was invented or needed or used or whatever, everyone had enough money, would there even ever have been slavery?
No.
Do you see what I'm saying? If everyone had an effective education from the beginning, would there even be ever have been slavery?
No.
Why was
Wouldn't be any need for it.
why was slavery even implemented? Was it purely a racial point? Was it like, we just want to control Black people?
No.
Or was it, we want to make money? Here's a group of people that we think we can use for that purpose. So it's always coming down to money.
That's why Black people enslaved other Black people.
Well, yeah, exactly. You have every race enslaving every other race. But what's even more interesting about
And their own race.
even the slavery point, it's like everyone is still just slaves.
Yeah.
Like, it's not like there isn't, everyone's a slave to the money system, which is the whole point. Like, if you actually want to end slavery, because I think racism is just it's like the excuse used to say why slavery was bad in the past, because it was racist. Okay, well, what if there was an equal distribution of every race within slaves? Then would it have been? It's like
equally
the
enslaved.
racism is just like extra. You see what I'm saying? Like slavery itself is inherently evil. It's not acceptable. So we should question slavery at all levels. And part of that questioning that slavery is questioning your slavery within yourself to what you believe is even possible. Right? So people don't even think that a world is possible because they want to hold their opinions instead of considering something else. What are you going to say, Asif?
On the self-perfected group call last night, or not last night, but on Friday night.
Yeah.
One of the things that we were talking about is how awesome would it be if you owned slaves, right? And every time they'd come out of line and they'd want to be like, fuck this, fuck these working conditions. And you're like, shut up. And you're like, get back in line. And they're like, okay, I'm back to work. And then it'd happen again. They're like, I don't want to do this. And you're like, shut up, get back to line. And then eventually they just like took the whip from you. And then you're like looking out the window at your slaves, any color. And they were just like, man, this is such bullshit. And they were like, wait a second, I got to get back in line. And then they're like, but I'm getting tired, but this is kind of bullshit. And like, yeah, come on, get back in line. Yeah. I got to focus here. It's like, if you were the slave master, wouldn't you be like, whoa, this is dope. I didn't even have to do anything anymore. It's like this program of keeping that individual in line is like automated inside of them. They just do it to themselves now.
Yeah.
That's how we're enslaved.
You've just perfectly described the current state of the world.
Yeah.
Exactly. We have been enslaved into our own minds. Our minds have become the slave master. And your opinions are like the little whips. It's like anytime you start to go into an area that would actually be best for you, your little opinions go, nah, get back here. You're like, oh, yeah, okay. So it's like maybe the reason, well, it's not maybe, I know why. The reason people don't want to look at their opinions is because they don't want to get whipped. Like they don't want to face the emotions and all that stuff within it, because you're going to have to be honest about it. You're going to have to look at that and examine it. That's why the tools that we're recommending are critical. It like can't be done without it.
Why would the truth hurt otherwise?
It's already hurting. Here's the thing.
Like, no, true. Yeah.
It's like Bernard Pullman said. He said, there is no truth. There's only denial of what is here. So it's not, so this is a belief that we have, right? The truth hurts. It's not truth that hurts. It's denying what is here that is hurting us.
And that's creating the contrast.
Because when people talk about truth, it becomes this philosophical thing, and then suddenly everyone has their own truth. No, everyone has their own experience of themselves. I'm not denying that, but there's no like, if you were to look at the world objectively, everything is all connected. So there isn't individual truths. Just like, and this is really what we're talking about. To have a world that's best for all, we have to first realize it's possible, and that therefore there can only be one world that's best for all. And I am stating, for the record, that world, it cannot exist if there's a dictator or anyone imposing on us what to do all the time. That would not be the best one. There's not two best ones, and one of them is you have a dictator and one of them you don't. Like there's only one, and it doesn't involve a dictator. So it's pretty easy to say what's not best.
Yeah.
It's a little bit more difficult to say what is, because you don't know everything yet. And I think that's another big main objection. It's like, well, how can I possibly know the outcome of every decision I make? Well, I want to give you all a quick example. My son, right? So spoiler alert, if you're lying to your kids about Santa Claus, you might want to pause the audio and make them cover their ears and put on like several sets of earmuffs, right? But we didn't lie to him about Santa Claus. He knows what I think I've talked about this before. He knows what it is. He knows it's a thing people pretend. He knows it's not real. He knows there's no way Santa Claus delivers everybody's presents down their chimney. You know why? He told me himself. Because not everybody has a chimney. So how does he get inside all the apartments? Right? It doesn't make sense. Okay. And he's like, not everyone has a chimney. Right. So my point is, if you don't constantly abuse your child's innocence by telling them things that aren't correct, and you only focus on things you can verifiably determine, they develop a very keen sense of discernment. And if you keep their natural learning ability open, which is why we use Technotutor with them every day, it's like he's so observant of everything that's going on. Like when I say a word, we were doing something the other night. We were playing some game, and in the game you get these little coins, okay? And he was like, how many coins do we need to get this particular thing that we were doing in this game? And I was like, about 1,500, because I was focused on the thing, right? Because we were doing it together. And I was like, about 1,500. And he goes, how many do we need? And I was like, about 1,500. And I was just trying to focus, right? And he goes, why are you saying about? And I'm like, oh, because it's about 1,500. He's like, yes, but how many do we need actually? Because he wanted to know the actual amount. And so what we started doing is, when we get to the little part in the game, we get our calculator, and we actually calculate exactly how many. So he's doing the calculations himself. He's 3 years old, on the calculator, right? It's like 5,000 minus 1,545 or whatever. And he's like looking at it. Okay. Right. And point is, we're not abusing his innocence by lying to him about a bunch of shit. So he's not going to be stupid. You see what I'm saying? The problem is, everyone's like, how can we possibly have a world that's best for all if that clearly implies we would always all individually have to be choosing what's best? But we're all stupid, so how's that going to be possible? Well, this is the issue, isn't it? Yeah. Right. But let me ask you a question. Don't you think Elon Musk probably feels pretty confident he can determine what's best in the given scenarios that he affects, that he influences?
Sure. Yeah.
He may or may not agree with me that, or us, that we can determine that, generally speaking. But I bet you he would agree it would be nice if everybody in the world was as smart as him. Do you think he would like that or not like that?
I think he would like that.
I would think he would like that, right? I would think so, because he could probably get a lot more. He's like, dude, we could be on Mars tomorrow. Right? Seriously, he'd be like, come on, let's go.
Jupiter, we'll make that shit livable.
Right. So I'm saying that's kind of my point to begin with, is if everybody were and then now we're going to have to, these little opinions start whipping us. Not everybody can be smart. It's like bullshit.
So you're the dumb one then.
Right. It's like, okay, yeah.
Everybody but you.
maybe it's too late for you. Okay, then support your children to become intelligent. Because if you're like, well, it's too late for me, but I want my children to be like Elon Musk, then talk to us, because we can do that. That's what we're doing with our kids. That's what we do with other people's kids that are working with us and so forth. They're doing it for themselves, really. We're just showing them what we're doing.
Yeah.
Right. But that's really, I think, where a lot of this comes from, is like, people can't see the possibility that they can change. And it's like, we know that the world is a reflection of us. We all know it, even whether we believe it or not. Yeah, you like that, right? We all know it, right? Whether we say it or not, we know it's an external reflection. Uh-huh. And so the reason why it can't change is because no one's going to take responsibility. So it's like, okay, so what you're saying is not everyone's going to take responsibility. Let's address that rather than whether it's possible to create a world that's best for all. What do you guys think? Do you want to add anything to that point, or yeah?
Real quick before that, it's like just going back to what about this person being in charge, or going back to the slave master, slave owner? I was talking to Maylat last night, and or this morning, one of them, and we were just talking about that point, and we're like, that's not really. She was having the realization, is like, that's not really good for anybody, and I was like, well, yeah, what would it be like if you were a slave master? And she was like, pretty good, I think. Like prior to that, and I was like, but like, put yourself in a slave master's shoes. What would you have to spend all day doing? She's like, making sure your slaves don't don't get out of line and keeping them in place. I'm like, yeah, doesn't that kind of suck?
Yeah,
it's like that deal. And she was like, it's like better for the slave master than the slaves. It's like, okay, yeah, like, sure, but it's like, it's still a shitty deal for everybody. And there's accounts historically of slave masters back in the day who were just like wrought with anxiety of like, oh shit, like one day, like, because there's 100 of them and one of me, and it's kind of like unconsciously, the proof being of like these accounts of people being like, oh my God, like one day they're gonna wake up and just like take all my shit and like overthrow the plantation and like we're gonna be fucked. Like my entire livelihood is based on them still believing that they're less than, but inherently I know that they're not actually less than. So they're just going to wake up one day. All it takes is one person, and then I'm fucked.
So here's what you would do. You'd start with saying, okay, you know what we're going to do? We're going to end slavery. There's no more slaves. Okay? Everybody gets to choose the job that they want to do. There's no slavery anymore. Oh, you need this much money to survive? Well, we're not just going to give you that money, even though literally in the 1920s, we gave that right to a bank, which was not even owned by the government. You can just print money out of thin air if you want to. But no one else can do that. Okay. So right off the bat, you got to pay to live on this planet. Okay. And then second of all, How are you going to do that? Well, we're going to create an education system. That way we make sure nobody's able to question anything, because we're going to know that you're all stupid because we made you stupid. And then when that starts to kind of not be manageable anymore, because the information technology has developed to a point where people could just talk to each other, we're like, well, how are we going to make people stop talking to each other? Okay, let's make everybody wear masks. Let's make everybody wear earmuffs, and let's make everybody wear face shields. And let's tell everybody, if you even like get near anybody, you can get a virus from them. And like, you can't trust anybody. And like, you should just stay in your house and just get on virtual chat on Facebook.
We saw a dude wearing a face mask and the face protector. It's pretty impressive.
On a virtual chat?
No, like just walking.
Yeah,
like,
can you imagine
really,
like the avatars of the future, like they're wearing masks and stuff? Hey, I want to point this one out, guys, because I just noticed this because we started with that one of who decides what's best for all. Opinions might differ. But right below that, it's like there's a statement right above it and right below it. One of them says, "Who chooses what is best for all? If people are not educated, they could be manipulated into believing that any crazy shit is best for all or required for the safety of people," as an example. Oh, you mean like right now? Like literally what the fuck is going on right now?
Yeah.
So the idea that, well, we can't do what's best because if we try to do that, people might be manipulated into doing stuff that's not best.
No. What they're really saying is that we can't educate people, because they're saying if people are not educated, then they're always going to get manipulated.
But you see how it says if people are not educated, it's more like they're not.
Yes.
What they really meant to write was since. Since people are not educated.
Exactly.
You see what I mean?
Yeah.
So, but we know really it's like if they aren't. And probably the person who actually wrote this might actually have realized people can be educated. So again, anybody, if we're making fun of these statements, just because we're making fun of the statements, not the person who wrote it. Because some of these, we asked, people were like, I literally don't have any objections. Like, well, just try to come up with something you think other people might have, right? Mm-hmm. But that's why I wanted to read that one, because it's like, yeah, if people are educated, though, they won't be manipulated into believing crazy shit. Just like let's tell you with Max. Like if you tell him something that doesn't make sense, he'll be like, that doesn't make sense. Like he'll go, is that actually? He's like, is actually? Because like something not right, right? Because we've given him enough examples of things that are not making sense and things that are. But it just reinforces the point about what we're seeing right now is, yes, if people are not educated properly, they can be manipulated into any kind of crazy shit for their safety. I mean, watch V for Vendetta. But I want you guys to comment on this next one. Oh man, I like this one. Contrast brings awareness.
Wait. Wait. First, I'm wondering if that came from the writing above, because that's even funny.
Oh, you want to like add it? Yeah, go. You want to read it?
Well, I'll read from the bold.
Yeah.
I don't see it. The evolution didn't achieve it yet, a world that's best for all. Why would humanity expect, wish, hope a new truth, reality, ideal, utopia? Polarity, duality, contrast seems natural and needed to form oneness. Ego creates division, which is an illusion. Drake, do you know if the next part, contrast brings awareness, it goes with that one?
No. That was completely
separate?
different.
Oh, man.
Completely separate. Yeah.
They're saying, okay.
But I put them next to each other on purpose, though.
Right. Trying to group them by similarity. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's so funny.
What did you want? Did you want to comment on it, Asif?
Well, if it did go together, but this is perfect just to show that if we just believe stuff without actually testing it with proof or evidence in our life, we can literally believe the exact opposite things. That contrast is needed to bring awareness.
Yeah.
But division is an illusion.
Oh, yeah.
You see what I'm saying?
If those went together. And I could see someone putting those together too, because it's like if you get into all this like spirituality, channeling and all this stuff, this is the stuff that they're saying. Mm-hmm. It's like ego creates division, but that's an illusion. So you have to just dissolve your ego, which means if you see division, you're ego. So stop seeing division.
Stop it.
Yeah. But the reality is if you're seeing division and you're not willing to do anything about it, that's ego.
No, Cameron. Division is just a necessary part of the human being. So that's really unity.
Yeah. Division, multiplication, subtraction, and addition, which my 3-year-old can do. Okay. But that's about it, right? That's the only division that you need. But this point about contrast bringing awareness is really key to examine, because there's so many dimensions to it. But one of them is I'm going to handle this one first. Okay. let's say contrast brings awareness. Okay, awareness of what? I would say awareness
What
of a
sucks.
problem that needs to be solved. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
So then, now that you have the awareness, solve the problem. Don't justify the problem existing because you need contrast to bring awareness.
Oh, let me say what people would say. You need contrast. Okay. Why? Why do you need contrast? To figure out what you don't want.
Mm-hmm. So then what?
Well, then you focus on what you do want.
Yeah.
So if you did that forever and you figured out, okay, everything you do want and you did it, then what? Would you still need contrast?
Haha.
Well,
mind broken.
Wait.
But also at the same time, I'm an infinite divine creator and I can create anything. It's like, okay, create a world without any contrast necessary, where you could just create based on what is best. Like, and then I think from that, a whole nother level of creativity emerges.
I think the actual argument there would be, okay, well, then I would stop expanding if I didn't have any contrast. Like, you constantly always need contrast. And so you figure out, what's best for you in this moment. But then, there's even within that, you can have some contrast. But
yeah. Okay. So, but look at what is contrast. Mm-hmm. Contrast is what it is and what I would like it to be.
Yeah.
Am I saying that you can't ever have that contrast? No. Because then yeah, by definition, you wouldn't have something else that you're going to create. But why would we use that to justify why people have to starve in this world?
Like, and by the way, if we for those of you who don't know, people actually use that to justify people starving.
And by the way, for those of you who don't know, people actually do starve in this world, right? So think about this. Okay. But the purpose of the contrast is to figure out what you don't want so you can create what you do want. Yes.
Right.
So do we want a world where everybody has what they need?
Yes.
No. Do we have it or do we want it?
Do we want it? Do we want it?
Yeah, we want it.
Yeah. Okay. So then let's create that. Will there be a new level of contrast we can't see?
Yeah.
Yeah. But would it, at that level, wouldn't the world be best?
Yeah.
We wouldn't be solving problems anymore. We would be just creating based on the contrast between what could be that we don't have yet. Like, people can't even imagine that you can have a life where everything is the best and that you still want to be creative. But it's kind of like if somebody was like, well, I wouldn't want to be Picasso because I don't even know what I'd want to do with my life anymore. It's like, okay, but you're not Picasso. So you don't even know what that's like. You see what I'm saying? Meaning, how can you say, like, I know what it'll be like for everything to be best, and it would just be so boring. It's like you are born in total suffering. Your life is misery constantly if you're honest with yourself. This whole world is that. Yeah. Right? We can create as many products and things to consume to try to cover it up, but it's not changing reality. In fact, maybe what month is it? It's just turned August, right? So maybe a year ago, you could make that argument, and you could probably deceive yourself quite easily. Yeah. Is anybody able to make that argument now? No, dude, the world's fine the way it is. No suffering. What the fuck are you talking about, bro? It's like, have you ever heard of coronavirus? Have you ever heard of like global lockdowns? Have you ever heard of like economies totally collapsing? You see what I mean? It's like, it's actually really cool because now people are getting the contrast because they're like, well, I just need contrast before I can do what I need. It's like, well, here you go. Here's the contrast.
And it'd be the same people who are like, yeah, some people need to wait until things are too bad in their life to actually make a difference.
And they're like sitting there
like, have you guys ever heard the story about the dog who's sitting on a nail, who just keeps moaning and groaning? And then somebody walks by and they said, owner, why does your dog keep moaning and groaning? And the owner says, because he's sitting on a nail. And then the guy walking by says, but owner, why doesn't he just get up and move? Well, don't hurt him that much.
Yeah.
And then they're like, people are so crazy sometimes. It's like, I'm aware in my own life that I do that, and I'm honest about it.
That's the self-honesty, right?
Yeah. Right? So that I stop following the feeling of, yeah, things aren't that bad. It's just like dealing with the fundamental things in my life so that the things that are just okay, I can also bring those up. So the things that are bad, you got to fix those first, of course. If you're starving, then fix that. So then you can look at, okay, let me get a system down pat where I never have to starve. I never even have to get into that mode. And before you can do that for yourself, you're not going to see it able to be done in the world. Like, if you adopt this, if you start seeing it as everybody's starting point is of some artificial lack, and that fundamentally the human being can't change. That's like, remember when we were talking about the starting axioms before people follow their logic? It's like those are the starting axioms. Where there was, I was talking with somebody else, Technotutor, and they were like, yeah, I was like, the best thing you can do is focus on changing yourself and then just expressing yourself, because then people will see you change and then they'll want to change, right? And like, wait, wow, whoa, you're different. You know, what are you doing, right? And she was like, oh wow, that's cool. And shout out Megan, shout out Megan. Um, she's local in Ottawa, and she was like, man, that like there's this analogy of, instead of, if there's a pitcher of water, right, and you're a glass, and there's a bunch of glasses around you, you know, the problem is that everybody tries to keep filling up the glasses around them, but you're supposed to fill yourself up first, and then from the overflow, then other people will get to drink off that. And then we were just kind of talking deeper, and I was like, let's just for fun take that analogy further. Like, uh, where are you getting the pitcher of water from? Why is there like just like a limited amount of water? Because then the pitcher runs out and then you can't fill yourself up, right?
Right.
And she's like, oh damn, like I never thought of it like that. And it was just like making the point of like, show them where you got the pitcher of water, then everybody can just watch you get the pitcher of water and then do it for themselves and then pour it for themselves. And some people are going to be like, that's too hard. Some people are going to be like, I can't. And then other people are going to do it, and it'll bring more people. And the point is, it's like looking fundamentally at, embedded in our society, in our like analogies and the way we see things, is like there's not enough for everybody. And the other part is, we have to develop the world in a way that involves me not changing. That's why everybody's saying like, yeah, but wouldn't a world that's best for all require people to be educated? Wouldn't like a world that's best for all require like we can have a world that's best, but guys, you guys should really think about, like, it kind of requires individual responsibility. It's like, that's the only thing we're saying. That's the only way it'll work.
Well, that's what's so cool about this group, Self Perfected, is that people are seeing that.
Mhm.
Like, to them, the objections are obvious, and these are that's why the problems we're working on are the only problems to work on. You know, like, no matter what other problem you can come up with, like green energy, this or that, or all those things, like, what is actually going to change the system is everyone changing their starting point. I want to add another thing, because we haven't really touched on this point. Somebody mentioned, I don't remember which quote it was in here, but the point of like the individual changing, your life would have been easier if the environment was different that you were born into. So if we change the education system, if we change the economic system, some very basic points, then what will happen is children will be born into a different environment, and then they won't have the same limitations within their thinking and their belief and their self-worth and all of that. Someone made a really cool comment on here. It said that, where is it? People, it's like they have to see themselves as being worthy. Do you know which one I'm talking about?
Oh yeah. It's a short comment.
Not valuing self.
Yeah.
A person can never create
Not
or even
valuing
consider
self.
something they don't believe they're worthy of. And this is the point. The reason why we don't believe we're worthy is because the system we are born into at a structural level says we're not worthy. It treats us as if we aren't worthy. We integrate that, we become the expression of it. And that's what we're defending. We can't live in a world that's best for all because I'm not worthy of it. Because I would have to give it to receive it. I'm not worthy of it. Why? Because I can't give it. I haven't been equipped to do that. So how do we get to that point where you have people who are totally okay with it? We have to first change the conditions that are creating the scenario that keeps repeating that process automatically. That's what we mean by the system. So that system is bigger than an individual. It has more power. It has more say over the way things work. Like when you go outside, it determines what the billboards are. It determines what's on TV, what's on the radio, what's on the internet, all that stuff, for the most part. So if we don't change those things, then no amount of self-change on the individual will ever matter from a certain perspective, because most people won't be able to change. Because most people don't have the self-awareness to do it. And that's not a personal thing. Like they're not inherently capable of that. It's just that the self-awareness comes from increasing your processing ability. And that's why the education system is such a massive barrier to the world becoming best, because it is diminishing people's ability to process information. And think about this, the emphasis is placed on what happens when you go to school, not what happens in the first 5 to 7 years when you're at home, because that's really where education starts. That's the foundation of it. So no matter what you do at school, you can change that all day long. That in itself won't change what's happening in the home. And that's really where the change has to occur. That's why that's what our approach is. It's about what's being done in the home. Then no matter if you do the right approach at home and you go to school, you'll be the best student in the class, hands down. Right? So you don't have to change anything in the school system, although that doesn't mean the education system suddenly is valuable, right? What do you guys think in terms of some of these other quotes? Are there any other ones you guys want to comment on?
That's socialism, and socialism doesn't work.
I'm just looking at Jake's
comment.
Oh, that's your personal opinion?
No. That's
no, I see that.
I'm kidding. Yeah. That's socialism, and socialism doesn't work. Yeah, I mean, socialism doesn't work, but it's not socialism, is it?
Yeah, it's not bringing everyone down to the same level. What we're talking about is fundamentally empowering everybody to be at the highest level of performance.
Socialism, let's just look up the definition. Ready?
Yeah,
define socialism. Ready? A political and economic theory of social organization which advocates that the means of production, distribution, and exchange should be owned or regulated by the community as a whole. Okay? So in itself, where does that say that every person is educated to the highest level?
It doesn't.
It doesn't. And this is the problem. Socialism is only about seeing human beings as economic units. So it's just like, how do we change the economic system so that everybody manages everything together and there's no like person who's benefiting only? That's different than what we're suggesting, which is everyone has everything they need. At that point, does it really matter who's managing it, who's directing it? It could be a fucking computer. It doesn't matter. The point is the starting point of it. The starting point of socialism is not everybody has the best, is it? That wasn't in the definition. I didn't see it in the definition. It's just that the community as a whole is controlling the means of production, distribution, and exchange. Is that going to work if most people believe in Santa Claus?
No.
You see what I mean? So none of those things work. In principle, it makes sense. Like, I agree with it. Like, why do we need one person who benefits from the whole system? Like, everyone should, in a way, have a say. But that's not going to work if no one has a proper education.
Yeah.
So, of course, it's never worked.
Another definition of socialism in Marxist theory, in brackets, a transitional social state between the overthrow of capitalism and the realization of communism.
Yeah, so you have capitalism, then socialism, then it becomes communism. So what is communism?
A political theory derived by Karl Marx, advocating class war and leading to a society in which all property is publicly owned and each person works and is paid according to their abilities and needs.
Okay.
Why class war?
Again, it doesn't bring into the point of how do we get everybody to an equally effective level. It's like, let's take everything as it is. Let's educate people just to be able to produce what we already see the economy demands, and then give everybody a job so nobody has to go without. But within that, you're not questioning, why is this person only capable of doing this job? Why is this person only? So it's like, okay, communism actually sounds pretty great, right? It's like, well, unless you're the guy who has to be like the garbage collector, I mean, versus the guy who is just really good at playing the violin. Do you know what I mean? Like, so basically the circumstances of your birth based on where things are already at is going to determine what you play, what role you play.
And it says where each person works and is paid according to their abilities and needs.
Right. So your abilities come from where?
Genetics and
what
your
you're
education.
Exposed to, when you're a child.
Right. So again, there's elements of all these things which are kind of cool. But if someone's criticism is, well, but that won't work if we implement it, I agree. And that's why we're not saying we're communists. We're not saying we're socialists. We're not saying we're capitalists. We're saying let's use common sense here, right?
As in the pre-described ideas are not best, to be clear.
Well, think
There's
about
elements of them that are.
All of these ideas are products of thinking that was based on taking self-interest for granted, taking the nature of the human being as primarily self-interested for granted.
Mm.
So communism is an evolution of capitalism, according to Karl Marx. It's not like an alternative. It's like, no, he's like, it's just inevitably where things are going. Well, look around at the world right now. That is the truth. So people can argue all day long with us about a world that's best for all and equal money and all these things are communism. But I'm here to tell you, we're going towards communism whether you like it or not already, where the way things are at. Go look at communist China. That is our future if we do not step up and take responsibility as individuals. This is what we've been saying for a long time now. It's not a choice, because you can't trust the average human being with a low education and so forth to always be doing what's best. So you need some kind of government control of everything. And of course they're going to say it's the point where the community, but that's a lie, because there's always going to be some group that is higher educated that is going to take the responsibility for the community and direct everything.
Yeah.
That's if we don't take responsibility for educating everybody. You see what I mean? So it's really, we have a choice of allow the world to move further and further into the hands of an elite few who then act as if they're just administering everything for everybody, or act in a way where we bring everybody up to the level where there doesn't need to be an elite. Like if everybody was as smart as Elon Musk, who would be elite? Now, that doesn't mean today everyone's going to become as smart as Elon Musk. We have to create that over time. It's going to take time. It's going to take perhaps generations to do that.
Yeah.
But what we're really talking about right now is not so much the ABC step by step, every little detail right now. We're just saying, can we look and find people? Can we find people who even see it as possible? First,
Yeah.
Right. And what I know for myself is the more you use these tools, the more you see it's possible, because you go, oh damn, I could become smarter. I can become able to process information better. I can become more honest with myself. I can take more responsibility. I can change a lot of things that I thought were just who I am before. And I can make my kids even smarter than I am. Oh, wow. We actually can create a better society. That doesn't have to be strictly engineered from the top down. Like there may be things we want to, from a top down perspective, engineer, like if everybody gets water, you know what I mean? Like we should have a system where everybody gets water. We don't need to get everybody on board first. Like that's a given. Whether everyone likes it or not, everybody should have water. But if everybody is seeing that, you know, a certain belief system or not is good or bad, or, you know, is effective or not, that's not something we should top down like force, practically speaking, because how would you anyways? If you understand where beliefs come from, it's the individual accepting it based on the environment impulsing them with it. So if you change the environment, they'll stop being impulsed. And then if you support them with the tools of self-awareness, increasing their processing ability, they can question it for themselves. It becomes natural to do so. So there is no world in which we have to go the communist dictator route. But as Karl Marx pointed out, it is the evolution of capitalism. So we started capitalist. You can see things moving towards socialism, and you can see inevitably where they're headed. I mean, isn't that what the whole Black Lives Matter movement is? They said they're Marxist. They're openly admitting this is what we're doing, but they're using all the tools of revolutionary theory, which is you say one thing that no one can disagree with, so you can really get permission to do something else, right? Of course, Black Lives Matter, right? But how come it's illegal to say all lives matter? Not that it's technically illegal, but I mean, it's kind of becoming so.
Societally so.
Like if you were to go to a protest with a sign saying all lives matter and get beaten up, nobody would come to your aid.
Nobody would care.
If somebody were to go beat up the Black Lives Matter people, you would go to prison immediately.
Yeah.
Neither one is, I'm not saying that that should be okay. What I'm saying is why, what are we being misled about? Right? Because what we're saying is, I'm not saying any lives matter. I'm saying life matters. But no one even really understands the definition of the word life, because they're just defining it as a person's ability to make money in a system based on there's not enough money to go around, which is a total lie.
Like, you guys ever think about, I remember I was hearing my mom say this, and like in terms of the image that comes up when people are like, "That's life." It's like they got a drink in their hands, they're on a patio, and like that's what life is. And that, even if by their definition of life, that would suck because that would just go to show they're living life like for like 2 hours out of the week. That sucks.
That's what you're gonna do all day, every day. Damn. Yeah.
So just to be clear, everybody, we're not communists because we're not advocating for class war.
No. But what's interesting though, if you look at it, isn't that already what's occurring?
Exactly. It's what he's saying is the
What
natural progression
is
of
occurring.
Yeah.
And that's what the issue with the whole Black Lives Matter organization is they're using the cover of racism and police brutality to actually conduct class warfare. So it's just when you look at the whole structure of everything, right? And I mean, I'm not here to be somebody who's trying to fight this organization. It's like they're just one of any other organization that's trying to just implement the next phase of what's coming in our world. We're here to provide real solutions that support the individual to take more responsibility. Here's one: greedy people at the top who will actively want to keep people suppressed, feeding off them, not wanting things to change. Would you guys agree we already have that?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So I guess what they're saying is
That's the objection. That's
how do we change that? Yeah.
that won't ever change or something,
Mm-hmm.
right? So what is it that allows that to exist?
The money system.
Okay.
They have people that are willing to work for a set wage in order to keep that system going.
Not wanting things to change.
They're hardwired for. Oh, I'll read the rest of it. I didn't realize they're hardwired for greed and believe and being evil, enjoying other people's misery. Okay, we won't be able to help everyone.
These are different ones.
Those are separate.
Oh, okay. Well, I think those two
Okay.
go together. Greedy people at the top who actively want to keep people suppressed, feeding off of them, not wanting things to change. They're hardwired for greed and being evil, enjoying other people's misery.
Full stop.
Yeah, like imagine you were, raised in the elite, and from day one you're taught, hey, you're better than them. So it's hardwired in that sense.
What is, which makes sense.
I kind of see it going a few ways. One is at some point the world gets in such a horrible condition that it even makes sense for the rich people to bring everyone up. That could be one potential scenario. Another one is they just say, all right, I'm out of here, peace, we're going to Mars. And then they just go colonize Mars. Just leave everyone on Earth to take responsibility for cleaning up the mess here.
Well, here's the thing. Like the issue, because in both of those scenarios, it's like, how can we make sure these people aren't a problem in trying to create a world that's best for all, right? We're trying to figure that out. So it's like, well, in some way, they're gonna, of their own accord, stop being greedy, right? If what's hardwired in your brain is the fact that there's greedy people at the top who just want to suppress people and feed off of them. So if you remove that from your brain, then you can participate with us in creating a world that's best for all. Because if there's enough people who are as smart and powerful as those greedy people at the top, they won't have as much influence, will they? It's like let's say there's Jeff Bezos and George Soros, whoever, and you're like, these terrible people at the top, right? Well, how do they have power? They have power because they are able to lobby governments to create laws that protect their wealth. But if you were in the government, would you allow their money to influence your decisions? Only greedy people get into government. See? It's like, why don't you get into government? But the reality is
greedy.
Yeah, exactly. It's like, if you had enough money, you wouldn't have to worry about that, would you? If you weren't doing it for the money. If you were doing it like, I'm going to take responsibility, I'm going to give unconditionally of myself to go into politics and do these things and change the laws, then you could do that.
Yeah.
The problem is there aren't enough people in that situation willing to do it. So it's not the greedy people that are the problem. It's the people who are just projecting other people being greedy. Do you see what I mean? So that's why, like, for myself, I'm like, no, part of the next steps of my life is to go into politics and so forth. First of all, it's building the network and enough of the funding and resources to be able to do it without having to be unnecessarily influenced by anybody who is trying to prevent this from happening. Whether that's through not having to accept their donations or having enough resources to, what's the word? Counter whatever narrative they try to create, or whatever media they create. Because the problem is, if you just go to politics yourself by yourself, you're not going to get anywhere, are you? If you're not a mega billionaire with a massive network, it's just not going to get anywhere, right? Yeah, exactly. That guy bought all the ads and still like he was in and out real quick, right? But do you see what I mean, though? So it's like the hard wiring that needs to be changed is your belief that there are greedy people that somehow they need to change something. But isn't it interesting? It's like, if you could, would you? What do you think? If the average person could force the greedy people to stop being greedy, would they? What do you think?
I think the average person. So okay,
Self-honestly.
Something interesting about like over the last, well, actually before I had TechnoTutor, I would see a lot of people advocating for the tax breaks that the rich get, that the wealthy get, and lately that's been changing. But a lot of people would advocate for that, and the criticism from like European countries and things like that would be, Americans all have this belief that they too one day can be wealthy or will be wealthy, even though it's never going to happen for them, right? And so when you pose that question of like, if you could stop the greedy people from being greedy, it's like, I think the vast majority of people, I don't know anymore, but I feel like a lot of people would say, well, you know, if I was in that position, I'd want to keep my money too. But it seems like today a lot of young people are coming out and saying, you know, we need to share the wealth.
As in, I think in a world that's like really best, there wouldn't be anybody with like exorbitant wealth, because I mean they would value something entirely different fundamentally.
Well, this depends on what you mean by exorbitant wealth, isn't it?
Yeah, like a compound with a helicopter and like private jets and like 30 exotic cars.
Who's going to wash all their cars?
Right.
So do they have like systems automated for that?
Maybe they have a car wash.
Right. So what I'm saying is, would you like, assuming that a person could have all that and it didn't negatively impact anybody else, would you have a problem with that, even though you don't value it?
No.
So neither would I. Like, hypothetically, if the person wanted to create all that, I wouldn't be like, no, we need to put rules in place where you can never do that. But if that's going to lead to a point where they start influencing other people in order to keep their wealth and therefore harming others, that's not acceptable, is it? So you have to look at things, I think, from that context, right? But I guess
what I was thinking about was like theoretically speaking is like, so now that makes sense to me. But I was thinking the or subconscious argument would be like, but I kind of want that, so I don't want to like say no accumulation of wealth. Like,
but why would a person want that?
Again, I think because they see that as valuable, that if you have that, then you'll get social approval and things like that.
Right. So there's a lot
that then there wouldn't be exorbitant wealth.
Yeah. So I think that I know in a world where everyone has what they need and they have what's best, a person would only have those things from a common sense perspective because they're doing something with them. See what I mean? Like why do you need a private jet? Because you have meetings in LA and New York,
right?
You know, in 1 week, and you need to do that quickly so you can get from one meeting to the next and so forth. Like, it makes sense.
The only real thing that I was thinking of that was like, okay, yeah, that's what I was looking for. Is like 30, 50 exotic cars. I was like, that's the one thing. Like, I get the other points.
But like, so much of what we value, let's just talk about as men. So much of what we value from that perspective is just because it actually represents the availability of sex. It represents that, and that's what we subconsciously, unconsciously want, because we don't have the stable relationships and so forth. We're coming from a point of lack within intimacy and sex and all these points, and the money just becomes a way of displaying that. Right.
It's
So
like
it's
sex
like
is
this,
evil and all those things of like,
well, it's
the
just like this
unconscious
subconscious desire that
suppression.
all these guys have to have a Ferrari, for example. It's like, would it be fun to drive a Ferrari for a moment? I guess so, but why do you actually want it? Like, let's just say, would you want a Ferrari and no one ever saw it? Like, you know what I mean? It's like when I look at what would I want as a next point, because I live in a suburban home, would be to have a homestead, like a farm with like goats and chickens and stuff like that. And that's actually what we're in the process of planning right now.
I'll be your goat.
You'll be my goat? Okay. You know what's funny is with the kids now, you guys probably saw, I don't know if you saw it when you were here, but Seneca and Max, well, they don't do it so much anymore. Like this was like kind of a thing they was doing for a couple weeks after we visited a goat farm, is whenever they would want something, instead of telling us, like this happened for like maybe like a week and a half, they would just go meh, like goats. And if I was like, do you need something? Do you want some milk? They would just be like meh, meh. And they would both be doing it. So I'd be up in my office. Yeah, I'd be up in my office and I'd hear them. I hear Katie, like, kind of rumbling, because I can't really hear perfectly through all the doors and everything, but I could kind of hear them down there. And I hear her talking to them, and I hear them like, meh, 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 like for like 20 minutes straight. They're just like, meh, meh. So I think they were done with that by the time like Drake and Rich and them came to visit. But
they did it the first day that I was there for like a couple minutes, and you were like,
minutes,
see? Yeah.
So what you're saying about the homestead?
My point is, when you start questioning when you start going through the layers of why you desire what you desire and removing the things that are not there by your own actual design, you start to place value on things differently. And it's like the fact that I know what we're able to do with our kids, I'm like, everyone should have that. So I'm not placing like having a farm above anything else. Like, as long as I can get that, I'm good. It's like, that's only a means to an end. That would be like a cool place that people could come to and visit, and they could kind of be away from the city, and they could be able to relax and discuss some of these things that we're talking about now, like in a physical setting, something like that. But it wouldn't be so I can go escape. You see what I mean? Because if I just detach myself from the world, I'm not here in the system being able to, you see what I mean? So there's no point within me, which is like, if I could just get that and get away from society, like I'm good. That's not how I see my own personal responsibility within this. And that's why any of these objections that come up, for anybody who might feel like I'm being flippant or kind of like, what's the word? Like just kind of teasing or making fun of the question. It's like, to me, they're so obviously not valid, because I know I can change. Like, I know what I've changed within myself, and therefore what I can continue to change. So I know another person can do it, because I know I'm not special. I don't see myself as a special human being who's just better than everybody else. I'm just like everyone else. We each have our own challenges and specific experiences that we go through. And there may be some people in this world that are just so far into their point of accepting who they are that they won't change. That is a possibility. But that's not going to stop me from sharing the things that other people can use to change, because even if it's 2 generations from now, well, the people who aren't willing to change will be gone. That's not something I have to do anything about. That's a natural part of being on this planet. People die, right? So I'm not worried about like, we need to force people to change. Like, no, we just need to keep giving the example and sharing, and then going in and influencing the systems that we can to then create conditions where people who would have otherwise done what's best, but because of the circumstances of their birth environment can't, because they can't process the information, or they were like I talked about this before, I think in a video outside of the podcast, where it's like, you put your kids in front of Disney and Pokemon and all that stuff. You're turning them into a slave to the Disney or the Pokemon corporation. That's what you're doing. Like, you're programming them to be a robot that just is like, Pokemon, I must watch Pokemon, I must share Pokemon. Like, that's what they've become.
School bag.
Yeah, exactly. The lunchbox, the pants, the pencils, the everything Pokemon. And literally, it's just a company was just like, oh, people seem to like that thing. Oh, let's turn that into like a lifestyle and sell that to people.
Because the best advertisements, word of mouth. So we're going to make walking billboards.
Exactly.
Then your child just becomes a walking billboard. Ah, fuck.
That's what they
Paw
become.
Patrol.
Exactly. So if you don't program your children with that and you instead teach them about things that are real, they'll just become walking, talking billboards for what's real. You see what I mean? That's just how it works. Like, you can't get away from the fact that you're going to have to program your kids. And if you think that, oh, wait, oh, you guys are talking about programming kids, you're talking about brainwashing, what are you talking about? It's like, what the fuck do you think education is?
Yeah.
Like, what do you think what do you think school is? You don't think they're programming your kid? What do you think when you're watching TV? Why do you think it's called a program? Like, it's obviously programming you.
It was so funny.
You know? Yeah.
We were talking, me and Mayla, we were talking about robots, right? And like how would you distinguish between, right? And this is coming up from a point.
Continue that thought, because I know.
Yeah. How would you distinguish what?
Between what?
Between a robot and a human.
Okay.
Right? And maybe you can make another point when I finish this point, because it might be a little more specific. But we're talking about how, okay, we're just going down the train of thought. It's like, if you are like, I don't want to go see this person because I know how it's going to go. I'm going to get there and I'm going to get pissed off because, all that stuff. Or like, oh no, this thing's coming up at work tomorrow or like next week, and next week's going to suck. Like, I can't wait till that week is over. And it's like, but that's your life, right? And it's like, why is that so predictable? And then we're talking about how she was like, yeah, you're going to be able to program robots for anything. And it's like, I was like, we're just kind of doing the thinking process. Like, what do you think defines, what would separate it, a robot from a human being? And I was like, spontaneity? It was the point that she brought up. And then she's like, well, let's look up the word spontaneity, right? Because we understand the value of what the fuck we're talking about. Right? So we looked up spontaneity. And basically, I'm not going to look it up. You can look it up and you'll see that it's basically doing something independent of external stimulus. So it's when you're like, right now, if there's nothing in the environment,
not possible.
Yeah.
But like,
or is it?
It was the point of like.
See, but real quick, I just want to interject this, and we can come back to it. Then, wouldn't the only real, truly spontaneous thing you can do is to create a world that's best for all? Because there is no external stimulus that's doing that. In fact, everything is stimulating you to not do it.
Yeah, exactly. So. And so, just for the definition, spontaneous, performed or occurring as a result of a sudden inner impulse or inclination without premeditation or planning or external stimulus. And it's saying in a given moment, it is, here's one of the sub-definitions, occurring without apparent external cause. So if you're like, you're like, I want to order food from this restaurant. Apparently that's spontaneous.
Oh, it's totally spontaneous. I never even heard of the restaurant before. I just invented the restaurant and there happened to be one.
Right? I wasn't even hungry.
And that's what we're talking about.
There was no chemical reactions in my body stimulating hunger. Is that internal?
The conversation warped into free will versus determinism. That initially, we're like, yeah,
I think you guys need your own podcast as well. The Maylat and Asif Hour. Yeah.
And she was like,
hear these conversations.
Like the determinism point of like, you can trace the line back to the causation.
Where does internal and external, where's the separation?
Mm-hmm, right. And so like from a possible context of what's actually real, like I'm assuming spontaneous would just be in a moment. You're like, I just want to do this thing, right? Like, let's distill it down to something like practical, right? Sure. And then we agreed that you could totally program that into a robot where it's like predictable would be X, therefore Y.
Right.
And the way you can program spontaneity would be X, therefore A, B, C, D, E, F, G. It could be any one of those things. Right. So you can program that in as a variable. But you still have
to have a random generator, which is actually in itself a program.
Exactly. That's what we're saying. It's like it's random, but
sure.
you can program in randomness. And so we were like, okay, so robots can totally be spontaneous. And the conclusion,
I see what you're saying. You could make a robot that appears spontaneous. Yeah,
exactly. I keep saying spontaneity. Spontaneous.
You're just combining spontaneity and spontaneous.
Exactly. I never decided. Spontaneous. And what we realized is that eventually you have the human who's totally predictable, who we know is how to react in every given situation. They know that their job is going to suck, or they're going to have to go through this shitty relationship with their mom when they see all this stuff. That robots are going to become more human-like than humans.
Like in terms of what we valuing as spontaneity and so forth.
Exactly.
Because they'll be programmed to be spontaneous without harming anybody.
spontaneous without harming anybody. They'll be able to change. They'll be able to develop themselves. And what she said, I was like, what would you say defines a robot at the beginning? And she was like, it's like they're just programmed kind of to just do one thing. And then we realized, we're like, oh, that's what everyone's programmed.
Bus driver.
Or like an engineer, or like a, you know?
Right.
I was like, yeah, 100%. Ooh, an Amber Alert.
Are you getting abducted?
How
No,
spontaneous.
I'm okay. There's a tornado warning. One second, I'll mute myself.
Okay, cool.
In Ottawa? I didn't know you had tornadoes.
Oh, what?
That's
in
kinda
danger?
crazy.
That
Take cover
sucks.
immediately if threatening weather approaches. Oh,
Oh.
shit.
If it's on, keep the mic on. I want to hear what it sounds like.
I fly away. Bye, guys.
It's, I can tell you, it's gonna suck. All right, but okay, I want to go back to the robot point because like there's so many cool points within that. Consider this, right? So a robot is something where it's like you're totally programmed, you're totally predictable, right? You don't have any choice. So people say like, well, I don't want to be a robot, right? I don't want to forgive myself and question all my programming because I don't want to be a robot. Okay. But think about it. So what is it that you're holding on to as a human being that makes you believe that you're not a robot? That's your opinions. So what opinions represent for us as human beings is a way of us believing that we're not robots. That's where we believe we are spontaneous and unique. That's what our opinions are. But again, just like we were showing with the logic of it with a robot, it's still some internal stimulus came from something external. Where did your opinions come from? They may feel internal now, but they came from your environment. And the environment can be what people are saying or doing or acting, or it's not just literally like the trees. It's everything that's occurring in your surroundings when you're little. So external becomes internal, and then those people have children, and their internal becomes external, which is the environment, which becomes the child's internal.
Yeah.
So there is no spontaneity, and this is what we have to understand. We can't be anything but robots, because that's the nature of reality at the moment. We couldn't.
Hang on.
Yeah.
Because that's pretty interesting, because a lot of people will identify with their opinions as like that's their personality or their thoughts or whatever, right?
Well, it is.
I feel like we're fucking people up right now. This is great.
but here's the interesting thing though, is that people think that those are their opinions, their personality, all of that, right? And who they are. And then they'll also, I really like the point that you made earlier about, well, you're abusing your child's innocence by teaching them things that don't actually exist, right? Because then you're basically giving your child this to create their personality in that way, which wouldn't be best for them to, it's not going to actually have a real impact for them to create things in this world and be effective in this world. It's going to have an impact where, you know, you might like that expression, but that's like purely selfish to you, right?
But if a person's being honest with themselves, they don't actually like themselves.
Yeah, that's true.
And I can say that, and someone can argue with me, and it's like, you can't lie to me. You can argue with me. You can say that's not true, I don't believe that, but you still have to be honest with yourself. So it doesn't matter what you argue with me for saying that. But the reality is nobody likes themselves. This is going back to that whole comment that someone had on that document, which is like, we can't have a world that's best for all if people don't value themselves. And I totally agree, because if you don't feel that you deserve what's best, you won't operate from that. You won't allow it. You won't accept it for anybody else or for yourself. You just say, well, I can't. And that's really what all of the objections are coming from, is you don't think that you're worthy. But think about this, like, if you could design your child's personality, right? Wouldn't you design their personality in a way where it's best for them? Like,
whoa, Cameron, are you saying that everybody's going to be the same?
no, that's not predictable at all. And why would that be best if everyone's the same? Isn't it interesting? Like, if we say, okay, let's have a world best for all, but we just want everybody to be the same. I'm like, why is that your definition of what's best? I didn't say that. I never said that.
Didn't you just say that you're going to program everybody to have the same personality?
No, I said, if you could design your child's personality, wouldn't you want their personality to be best?
Yes.
And somebody might say, well, I don't design my child's personality. What are you talking about? Like, yes, you do. You just don't do it on purpose.
I love our impressions of the
Of
figure
other
who's
people?
giving of the figures that are giving these objections.
I need to get like Katie made these puppets for the kids, right? Little. I need to get like a puppet, like, oh, we've got oh, here we go. And he's like, you can't pick a one that's best for all. Oh, I'll just wear the Corona mask. I'm instantly an amazing ventriloquist.
That would be fun, actually.
Yeah, you can have one that's a robot and one that's a human. You can pick which one's which. One more thing on that robot point. This is what took me a while to really understand about human nature being programmable, because we are programming our children, right? It's why when I was a kid, I loved Pokemon. I just watched the show and was impulsed by it. And then I go around telling my friends about Pokemon cards and, spending my money on Pokemon cards.
Hard-earned money.
Hard-earned money when I was like 6.
Do your chores, Mitchell.
And like,
There's this other kid in Africa like, may I have water, sir? You're like, I want Pokemons. Be gone with you.
I need
like literally what's happening.
Zapdos.
I know.
Yeah. It's so whack. So what I have loved to realize though about TechnoTutor, because at a certain point I realized in self-development, reading books, writing notes, highlighting the books, understanding the material in the books, like, oh, if I can learn about this, I can implement it in my life and I can make more money or create a better life for myself or find a girlfriend, whatever. That's like the theory behind reading books, is that you read the information and you live your life differently. So we're attempting to program ourselves through books. Yeah. And so I would take whole stacks of white paper and have my pen and I would write notes and I would basically rewrite the book in my own words. And I was doing that for months, like all the time, reading over and over and over.
Committed guy.
And then thankfully I met you guys. You guys are like, how much time do you spend doing that? Like, do you want to just know how to do that instantly? I was like, that sounds too good to be true, but okay, show me what you got. And then you guys showed me TechnoTutor. And then I was like, all right, let's test this thing out. And I'd go for like 2 to 3 hours a day sometimes, just programming myself, to the point where I'd be falling asleep at night and I'd be getting totally different thoughts in my mind. I'm like, oh my God, something's changing. I don't quite get this thing. But like 2.5 months later, I was totally in a different headspace, so to speak, in how I approach my business, how I approach my friendships, my relationships, how I talk to myself. And for the first time, so now, I mean, because it takes a while, but now I'm 1 year into using it, and now I'm finally at the point where I actually like myself. Like, because you're saying, because I've actually finally programmed myself to be who I think I need to be like an awesome person, and to support people and to give as I want to receive and all that. But I have 26 other years of being programmed with low self-esteem, Pokemon, random stuff that doesn't really have to do with reality. So it's like this process of it. But now I see how TechnoTutor is the key to navigating reality, because nothing else can actually change your programming, at least that fast. I mean, I would do everything to try and change my programming. I did binaural beats. I did all sorts of stuff, meditation and everything.
A bunch of stuff that you don't want to talk about. I see you.
All these different things that you think could somehow change the programming that's running who you are.
Yeah. And
none of it worked at all. Or maybe it would kind of change your thoughts for like a week, but then the real quote unquote shit hits the fan, and like coronavirus happens and your entire business model has to shut down, and everything changes, PayPal freezes your money, whatever. It's like, that's how you know what your real programming is. In that moment, are you like, okay, what can I do about this? Or are you like, oh, I knew it's too good to be true, right? And that's where I noticed TechnoTutor really worked, because then I pivoted my whole business model, and now it like unfolded to this whole next level.
Yeah, so. Dude, I just gotta say, like, I've been going back through our messages, me and Mitch.
Oh yeah, you sent me some of those old ones. I haven't listened to them again.
But I've been going back through the messages for in Messenger between me and Mitch, because I'm just looking for business stuff that we had agreed upon. And you might have seen I sent you like a message of like 11/1/19 Mitch's voice clips on this and this. I'm like tagging them because I'm telling you, man, it's crazy. What
Those are for
exactly?
subscribers only. These late night voice messages.
Dude, I am thinking about it though, because I swear it documents your journey to a fucking T, man. It's like your distress, your questions, and then over week after week, day after day, whatever, and then like who you are today, man. I was like, that's why I started sending them to you. I was like, dude, this is fucking crazy.
Huh.
Like what most people have been stuck in for years, you overcame it in like months.
Yeah.
With just not comparing yourself to anybody else. It's like what you were going through, the biggest problems that you were having in your life, man. And it was so cool, like remembering who you were. I'm like, dude, I remember who I was when I was talking to you then, who you were when you were talking then, your problems, my problems, all that stuff. And then how it's like, Mitch, it's like you're living a completely different life now.
Yeah. Well, I remember, because this totally relates to the whole theme of this episode is, Asif, we were talking about human evolution and how we all evolved, and like we automated in our mind self-interest. Like, how do I feed myself? How do I get food or whatever? And I'm good. Okay, and then for my family. And that's what's been automated, and we haven't evolved past that. Everyone's just running this program of self-interest only. I'll be nice to you because it's going to help me. But now, and then you're like, no, this is actually what this is about with Technotutor and Destiny and everything. It's about automating, doing what's best for all, so that we all become this like collective organism that's always doing what's best, and that's what's automated. And then it's reflected in the world system, monetary system, education system, all that. And I was like, I remember this is, I don't know, probably like 11 at night, and I'm like outside, like shouting on the phone, like, dude, this is what I've been wanting to do for so long. And now I see it so clearly that is literally what we're doing. It just takes time. It just takes patience.
Right. And the picture is becoming clearer to even us as individuals, like step by step. Right. And one of the things the thing that me and Mailat were talking about was we were looking up the progression, the evolution of man. Right. And there was like, Homo erectus and then Homo sapien. And before that was Homo like erythropalus or something. I don't remember. But it was saying that the development of that one before Homo erectus was like their brain grew and they were able to create more utensils, like tools. I'm like, oh, that's pretty cool. You see the practicality of that. So then the next step to that would be create better tools, which was like where they were at with Homo erectus and being able to stand up because it served their, like, they needed to, because they had to, like, there's something to do with the jungle and like droughts and stuff like that. Like they needed to stand upright. And I was like, okay, so then they needed to continue to progress in the tool making. So then they were able to do that with Homo sapien when they started having thoughts, and they started like basically the gray matter in their brain expanded vastly, and they could create more specific tools. And they were creating a lot of awesome tools. And then the next evolution was like, yo, we got to learn to work together. And that's when Homo sapiens sapiens was created, right? It's like Homo sapiens when they started thinking. And then Homo sapiens sapien is when language was created. And so all we're talking about is the next evolution of mankind, where it's like you have the choice to go, like, remain a victim to or at the effect of your thoughts. But doesn't it just make sense, evolutionarily speaking, what would be the point of becoming aware of your thoughts? So there's Homo sapiens sapien, you can think, and then Homo sapien, you can think, and then Homo sapiens sapien is you can think about your thoughts, or you're aware of your thoughts.
Self-aware. Yeah.
Exactly, right? It's like the whole point of that, doesn't it just make sense? With the reason you would want to be aware of your thoughts is so that you can change them. So then instead of just participating in your conscious mind and just using thinking to change your thinking, of what Mitchell was talking about, right? What if the point wasn't to use your thinking to change your thinking? It was to use your thinking to direct yourself to something that could program the more fundamental thing that leads to thinking, right? that's the whole point of Technotutor is you're thinking it was a result of your unconscious processes. When your stomach is empty, you'll be like, oh, I'm hungry, right? And so the point of that being that oh, I'm hungry, you're not just like, oh, okay, just stop being hungry. Like, just forget about the hunger. It's going to come up again when your stomach growls. So solve the physical problem. Go interact with your environment in a way that solves the unconscious or the bodily point that's releasing the hormones that's telling you that you're hungry, right? So stimulate your body in a certain way using your environment in order to make it so that you're not hungry anymore. Because there's one thing about this is what self-improvement world is, oh, you feel bad about starving? Stop feeling bad about starving. Like, just stop worrying about it. Because if you just think it hard enough,
visualize being full.
yeah, exactly. Visualize being full, and if you can visualize it, you want to visualize so clearly as if you have it. So then that way you don't actually need to go get it, you know. Like,
but this is the difference with everything, like you were saying, Mitch, that you had done before, is everything you were doing was looking for something external to change you. The difference with what we're talking about is it is in a sense external, but it's actually changing the internal, because that's where the change comes from. If it doesn't become internalized and become a internal point, it's not really coming from you. And so going back to the spontaneous point, the world that's best for all will be spontaneous. Do you see what I mean? It will come from everyone's internal impulsing from themselves, but you have to do that first. You have to first externally impulse yourself for long enough until your internal has changed, and then the expression of that will be something different. So it'll happen spontaneously, right? It's like in chemistry, if you study the word spontaneous, it's when the conditions are right that the reaction occurs without any additional input of energy. So it's not like it didn't require something in the first place because it had to get to those conditions. But then once those conditions are there, it just happens automatically. It's happened naturally, right? And so that's what's important to understand about your personality. To address that point you were talking about, Drake, and then also the point about being a robot and all that stuff. It's like your personality is not actually you. It's not actually yours. It's the expression of what's going on internally, but it's from your external environment. It's just all the bits and pieces of everything you've seen and little pieces you've chosen. But the interesting thing about it is you're still going to have a personality. We're not saying you just don't have a personality. You're just like, I am this way. Like, you will have a personality, but the personality you've developed so far was a response to having to survive, not what's the personality that I can create for myself that makes me the most creative, the most enjoying of life, really, fundamentally. Because all the conditions that formed it were, you have to survive. You're only worth what you can provide economically to the system. You don't have value in and of yourself. So that's all the personalities, even the ones that we like, the personalities that we like, it's because we feel in some way we're going to get more money, more sex, more followers, more recognition. It's always from a starting point of lack. And you don't even realize the people who have the personalities that you like, you don't know what their internal world is like, and that they're constantly judging themselves and so forth. It's just that
it's
personality
funny.
developed naturally. What?
Yeah, there was somebody that I'm not going to give any context to it just for the sake of privacy, but they're saying that, oh, this person has like a lot of YouTube followers, like somebody they know, like that, like was in their environment. And I'm like, oh, really? I didn't know that. They're like, yeah, they have like 700,000, right? Imagine like one of your friends had like 700,000, 800,000 followers.
Yeah.
And it's like, oh, cool. And then they're like, yeah, but they tried to like kill themselves. Like recently, you know, it's like, they're like really depressed inside. And so it's like, you can fake personality. And why would you fake a personality? It's because you know that personality that doesn't come naturally to you is more effective in this world, right? And so it's like, you know, maybe when you initially said that of like, hey, if you wanted to program your child to be, to have the best personality, people were probably like, well, what's the best personality? Like, you think everybody should just be outgoing or you know, confident and talking about things like you are? Isn't that what you want though? Like
but also it doesn't mean the one best personality.
Yeah, like it's not.
It just means the best personality for them.
Yeah, exactly.
You see, it doesn't mean it can't be unique in a way, but the the context of the personality should be that it gets you what is best and creates what's best for others. If your personality is outgoing, but you're always belittling other people just so you can feel like a positive charge inside of you, is that best? Does it actually make sense?
The problem is like sociable and outgoing shouldn't even really be some kind of like, the only reason that that's like a personality trait is only because people became afraid of strangers.
Yeah, exactly.
Is the point I was making, is like that should come naturally. Like when you're a baby, you communicate with everybody all the time, right? It's like something that's developed that you become like, fuck people, right? Like they're assholes and all this stuff.
Exactly. So again, your personality mostly is a product of your environment not being best. And so you've developed some sort of survival thing to protect yourself emotionally, physically, whatever. It's not actually like you designed it. Would you want to live in a house where someone designed it just by like kind of randomly putting things together and then being like, well, it is what it is? Or would you be like, no, I want you to plan that fucking thing out, like each inch of it, like make it perfect so it doesn't collapse on me. But the world is a product of all of our personalities and programs that are not really designed effectively. And so it's busy doing what? It's just like busy collapsing on us. Right. So there's no amount of masks you can wear to protect yourself from all the fucking dust that's coming when everything falls apart.
So, that's a good analogy. The biggest problem that if you're listening to this podcast, the biggest problem you'll have is just going to be a result of you not believing that you can change. That's going to be it. And
exactly.
Truthfully, what I was saying before is like there's your unconscious, your subconscious, and your conscious. And you can't use your conscious. It's worth so little that you can't use your conscious to try to change your conscious, because your conscious is a result of your unconscious. In other words, I'm saying that what I was saying with the stomach thing is like you thinking the thought of I'm hungry or I want to go get food, let me check the fridge. That's not like some self-willed like, oh, like that's what makes me me. It's just a product of your body.
It's actually your stomach talking to you.
Yeah, that's a great way of putting it. It's your stomach talking to you, right? So then you use your conscious mind to direct yourself of what food do I want. But generally speaking, it's like you choose the food to satisfy your unconscious, or your body is another way to say unconscious. And so what we're suggesting, the whole point of Techno Tutor and Destiny, the Destiny process, is to interface and program your unconscious. That's Techno Tutor. Is to program your unconscious. And you use your thoughts or your conscious, and you use your feelings and emotions or your subconscious as an indicator of what is my body trying to tell me right now. That's what I should look at. That's what I should change. If I am like reacting because Mitchell said, dude, you're lazy. It's like, it's either I'm like, oh, you're right. Now I can improve my life because he's spotting something that I don't see. Or I'm like, how dare you call me fucking lazy? I bet you there's some minute in the day that you waste too. It's like, okay, let's say Mitchell's like, oh, dude, I waste lots of time. You're still lazy. I'm like, oh, fuck.
or like if you're in a relationship and you're always thinking like, oh, my wife or my husband, they're such an asshole or something like that all the time. It's like, would you defend your right to that opinion? Would you be like, I have a right to that opinion? Or could you say like, well, maybe if I'm thinking that all the time, if I'm accepting that within myself, I'm reacting to something they're doing, which is making me think that way. And therefore I'm also accepting and allowing behaviors in them and me that's creating the conditions where they're acting in a way where I'm always thinking that. So it's like, instead of defending your right to the opinion, look at where it's coming from so you can actually change the conditions that are causing that. You see what I mean? So how many of opinions do we have where they're just products of the fact that we got fucked up when we were children? They're not valid. So again, it's not that you can't have any individual preferences, but they should not be preventing you from having the best possible life. Right? I want to ask one more thing, because I don't think we should go too long with this thing, but with this particular episode, but I do want to add this one point in there and get you guys' perspective on this. When people say my best self, because there was one of these where it's like, you should become your best self. I just want to address that one because that's like a big one, right? What do you guys think people mean by that? And what does it actually mean in the context of what we're talking about?
My best self, I think people generally use that as They use it. Well, okay. What they mean by it is like the best that I can do in this moment. But they use it as an excuse of like, if I'm having a bad day, well, then my best self is going to be diminished. And so it's like an excuse as whatever you get in this moment. I don't have to actually change. That's my best self today in this moment. That's what I see within that.
Okay. Anybody
I don't know if
else?
this is just me, but I think when people say my best self, they're to add another angle to that is like, I feel like I can take on anything, and like I'm no longer afraid, and like life, like when you picture you being your best self, there's like this commercial playing in your head that's like light and like shining and like nice, right? Where like there's no situation that holds you back down, and like
Right.
you're independent and all this stuff.
So is it an experience of themselves? Is what I'm getting at. Or is it in each moment you're doing the best thing that you could possibly that could be done in that situation?
Yeah, people are talking about the experience, like
Right.
Asif said, that commercial playing in their mind. When
Yeah.
when I think the best redefinition of best self is being here, directing myself to do what's best for everybody in every moment. Where your best self is not living in a vacuum of like, well, I'm just my best self and I just feel good or whatever. It's like
It's a really good point.
you're interconnected with everyone, so your choices and your decisions should factor in what's best for everybody.
Okay, so
That's really well said.
consider this for a moment then, because this will tie the whole thing together. When any individual person looks at their best scenario for how they would like to live their life, what limit would a person put on that and why? Or let me ask it another way. When a person looks at their life that they would want to live, don't they go, what's the best possible thing I can imagine? Like,
Yeah.
does anybody go, like if I said to you, look, I'm going to give you $1 billion and all the private jets and private island and food and beautiful people around you and everything that you want, would you be like, no, that's not for me. I don't want to do that. I just want to live in a trailer park.
No,
I just want to live in Africa, you know, in Ethiopia or Somalia and like, you know, like not have enough to eat or something like that.
No.
Like, do you see where I'm going with it? Meaning, doesn't every person individually, of course, there's going to be a limit to their imagination based on their environment, right? So they can't even conceive that it's possible to have a
When they were
compound
young,
like Bill Gates, right? But generally speaking, they'll go, I want to have everything I can imagine, like the best. Yeah.
Yeah.
So then why is it that then somebody would object to the world being best for all and say, well, but what if other people don't accept it?
Because they're afraid that someone's going to impose their version of what is best on them.
or it's going to keep them from having their version of what is best.
Yeah.
But how can your version of what's best contradict another person's?
It shouldn't.
Oh, only
How
if it
can
takes
it?
away. Only
Yeah.
if it takes away from them, or it requires somebody like losing.
To be a slave.
yeah,
Yeah.
just basically, yeah.
Because then
So
it wouldn't
does
be what's
anybody-
best.
So does actually anybody want slaves? Really? Like
No.
really?
No,
Like what do they want?
do you want world peace?
Right? Now the other point to handle the objection that people have is this idea that people are all just addicted to self-interest and getting energy and they don't really care about what's best for everybody else, right? But wouldn't you agree those are consequences of being born into an environment where you have to get money to survive? So a personality and a character is created within you that's always seeking self-interest because otherwise you will die.
Yeah.
So if the conditions were different, would you naturally develop that kind of character and personality? If the conditions you were born into was people always helping each other out and having the ability to do that and never feeling like if I help you, I'm going to lose out or something like that. If that was the environment you're born into, wouldn't you just naturally be like, oh, that's the way the world is. Like, I'm going to do that because that's what's
Yeah.
happening right now, just in the context of self-interest.
Yeah.
So
As
in
in-
this
I was just gonna make one point. Is like imagine going back to the start, and you're born into the world, and I would say the number one factor that people argue towards like both parents not being at home, as in I think deep down people see, not even deep down, it's like people know like yeah, it would be ideal if man and woman or man and man or whatever combination, but just two people at home taking care of that child, right? or like putting all your resources as the two people who created that baby, like being at home taking care of the baby. And the only reason that people say of like, well, not everybody can do that is because of money, is because somebody has to be working.
Yeah.
And that creates a bunch of consequences. And we've talked about, I think we talked about the points of when a baby watches their like mom, like gets dropped off at daycare, or a young child or whatever. It's like they think their mom is dead, they think their parents are dead when they leave the room, and all that stuff, the trauma that they experience throughout all that, and being with strangers all the time, and all the different factors that go into creating that child. Then the kid is then the parents are like, where did you learn that from? And it's creating like this turmoil in the relationship. It's because all these factors that came into, you have to work, somebody has to work, someone has to be working. That if we just remove that point alone, and they had the stories of millionaires and billionaires, when their wife becomes pregnant, they put them on like the most peaceful like compound that they have, void of all the stress of life and all that stuff, because they know that that's having an impact on the growth and development of that child in the womb, right? It's like, imagine we could remove the stress of money, of having to go to work, because if you don't, you're going to die. Like, you're not going to be able to provide for your child. It's like either create the best environment from both people being at home and creating the best environment, but you can't eat because you don't have money, or be able to eat because you have money and feed your child, but then your child suffers. It's like a terrible situation that we've created based off the world that we've all accepted.
Yeah.
Right? It's like, imagine if you just remove that and you're born into the world and your parents aren't stressed about money because they don't have to worry about that. And they don't have to worry about making sure that you have the best, and making sure that you have the best nutrition, have the best toys to fully express yourself, where it's not like, like I can't buy you that because like we're strapped for cash and all this
It's just
stuff,
a
so
given.
we'll never experience all that. Exactly.
Yeah.
It's like that alone. Hopefully you see the simplicity, or hear the simplicity and what that could create as a loving, caring experience, where it's not like your dad's just gone all the time because he has to work, traditionally speaking, right? It's like they're just like gone. That's what it was for me. It was like most of the time my dad wasn't there, not because
there
it's
is
like
a
he just
lot
wasn't
of
working.
there's a lot of dysfunction that everyone is taking for granted because the environment that we live in is not best. Right?
Exactly.
So I'm going to get this episode banned, right? It is best to have a father and a mother at home with the kids.
Blacklisted.
Now,
Boom.
somebody is going to say, well, that means you're saying gay people shouldn't be able to adopt kids. No, I'm not saying that. Because in that context, those people can potentially provide an environment that's much better for that child than where they're at. But the reason why I'm saying that it's best for the father and mother to be together is because they both share the genetics of that child. So the child has genetically inherited those people's minds and their patterns and their beliefs and their, like, even the stuff, it's like when you have a child, your DNA forms part of the structure of that child, and your patterns from like 6 generations back go into that child. So as a parent, the father and the mother, you're in the best position to, when your child is going through things, to know and recognize, oh, that's from me. Okay, I can support this person through it because I can recognize it in myself. I'm going to do the forgiveness, and then I'm going to support this child with it. It's not because I don't think a gay couple, whether they're both men or both women, can't be like loving or provide a stable environment for a child. But what I'm saying is, if it's possible, it's best to have that. And I know people are going to have an issue with that, but I'm not here to tell people what they want to hear. I'm here to tell them what's best, but then explain why. So I've just explained why I'm saying that. But that doesn't mean that we should create laws that says gay people can't have kids or something like that. Or if you're a single mom, you have to get rid of your kid or something. Like, no, because we're in an environment where this is where we're at. Okay. But if we continue to tell people, oh, no, you don't need a mother and a father in the picture and all that stuff, like it doesn't matter, then you're actually making it more difficult for the child to process all of the shit inside of them. Now, the other thing is a lot of the consequence that comes from the parent, like the mother and the father, not being able to be together is because of, let's just say in the case where it's not like a gay couple who are, doing some kind of like they're having a child and one of the person is donating some of the DNA or whatever the case is. Let's just say it's like a mother and a father, they have sex, that's what's producing the child. In that context, the reason why they wouldn't be together and stay together would be why? What would be a reason why they wouldn't stay together?
They have terrible communication.
Right.
One
Like they're not in
cheated
love
on the
anymore.
other.
They're
Yeah.
abusive towards each other. Those are all dysfunctions. These are all things that with a proper education wouldn't have happened in the first place. But if the person is walking these processes and using these tools, they can sort out for themselves. I'm confident about that. Right. So that doesn't mean if a father is abusing the mother and the child that because I said it's best to have a mother and a father, he should be there. Like, no, if he's going to be like hitting them or something like that, or if the mother is going to be beating up the dad in front of the kids, that doesn't make sense either.
Yeah.
But then those people ideally should be supported to start developing the ability to process a lot of that stuff. So there's a difference between saying what is best and how it should be versus what's practically possible for you or someone else right now in like today. Any of that aside, what we're really looking for is, and you notice like Asif's getting some really cool examples about if you didn't have to have these stresses of money, and someone's going to look at that because that's what we're talking about today. All these points is like, how is that practically going to happen? Like, how are we going to make that happen? Like, it makes sense, guys. Totally get it. I'm on board. It makes sense, but how are you going to do it? We know how to do it. But the purpose of our podcast, of all these points, is not for this to be the platform where we lay out that step by step. What we're really doing is looking for people who are like, okay, I agree in principle. How do I do it? So that then we can connect. Because until you have the tools to start working on yourself in the best way, not just like, oh, I'm working on myself. No, you're not. No, you're not. You're just looking for the next high. You're looking for the next buzz in some form or another. You're not actually working on yourself. Unless you're doing this process, you're not actually working on yourself. Okay. So what we're wanting to do is support you to say, like, here's the tools you need in the process. Now start doing it. As you do that, now you're going to start to see what's the next step and what's the next step and what's the next. That's why our goal isn't to try to explain what the steps are. We're helping you, because we've helped ourselves do this, handle the objections. So as you're walking this process, you're hearing our perspective. You're like, oh, wow, that makes a lot of sense. Instead of you having to call me and ask me, well, but why can't, what about this and this and this? Or having to call Mitch. Because like Mitch, who was there when you had these questions?
Asif.
Right. So you're talking to Asif, you're talking to Ken. They're answering these questions. So we're like, well, fuck, why don't we just tell everybody what we're always talking about with each other? This makes, and like, what did I realize for myself? So this podcast, it's like two things, this whole podcast, not just this episode. It's like people who are kind of like looking for how can we make the world better, and like how can I make my life better, and how can I generally improve, and is there something beyond that? But even more than that, it's people who are already into the processes and using these tools, and we're helping you accelerate your process. Not like you're gonna just go have it done in a day, but instead of having to loop and like try to figure out things for yourself, we're creating the environment where it's like you can hear our perspectives, so you don't have to figure it out all 100% from scratch. Of course, we can't explain everything. There's going to be things in your individual life you are going to have to figure out for yourself. I'm not looking for you to take responsibility for my life. I'm not going to take responsibility for your life or anyone else's. I'm here to give to the world what I can in the best way possible based on using these tools and walking this process and removing all the points that are any kind of limitation. And all I'm asking is that everyone else do the same. And there will be many people who are not in a position to do that right now. So we're looking for those people who want to step up as leaders and be like, okay, what are the systems in this world that are kind of creating conditions where a lot of people can't really even really approach these points? And it's not because they're bad people. It's just that's the nature of the conditions of where they're in, what the environment they're in. So then those of us who can go into that point in the system, make the adjustments that will relieve the pressures, so that eventually we can have that point that Asif's talking about, where it's like literally any child that's born, the mother has no stress whatsoever. Zero. And so that child comes into the world with a foundation, like where they don't even have any programs within them that are causing them to act in ways that aren't best. isn't that what you would have wanted?
Yeah.
That's what I would have wanted. And so I realized the only way I can get that is to create it. So I don't know if I'm going to come back here or not. If I do, great. If not, well, fuck. I mean, who am I? Am I the person that says, well, I ain't coming back here, so who cares? Fuck you people. Like, you know what I mean? Like, is that who you are? So what we're looking for is the people who are like, you know, who I am is I want to make the world better. I have objections, but I want to make the world better. Like, I don't, in other words, even if somebody came up with some objection that I literally couldn't see the logic through, I'd be like, I don't care. I'm going to figure it out anyways. Do you see what I mean? Like, you can give me the best objection ever. I'm just going to say, well, fuck. Let me figure it out.
Yeah, give me like,
isn't that what the billionaires do in business?
Yeah.
Like, your whole business is fucked. You're collapsed. You might as well give up. They go, no, I'm going to figure it out. And then you're like, holy shit, how did they figure it out? It's because they didn't give up. They were like, so I'm not worried about there might be some point where I don't know what to do. But if I surround myself with other people, you guys, we'll be able to figure it out together way better than I could on my own.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that's the point of one of the reasons of this podcast is we're looking for those people who are like, fuck yeah, I want to do I want to create a world that's best for everybody. I don't want to allow any excuses. I like where you guys are going. Right. And we'll also be bringing on from time to time other people in our circle, like in the self-perfected group, like other, you know, like our spouses, our girlfriends, you know, all that stuff. We'll bring these people in and other people that we work with who you haven't even seen yet unless you're in the self-perfected group already. So unless you guys have any other points you want to add, is there anything from you guys in addition?
So to nail one of those points how that Cameron was saying is that if you're thinking, oh, but this relationship person, like they can't do what you're saying. What Cameron was saying is that if you're in the position where you can do what we're saying in terms of have the time and space to look at yourself and really take the time to take apart yourself, and you have the freedom to choose the purpose for yourself, then make your purpose creating a world that person, that your aunt, your brother, your sister, your friend, or whatever, has the environment where they can take the time to work on themselves, develop themselves.
You know, I just realized. Okay. Of the few popular movies that I've seen in the relatively recent past, the one that just sticks to my mind, because you guys said we've talked about, I think it was like on the first or second episode, we talked about this Homo perfectus, right? And you mentioned it earlier, like the next evolution, right? Yeah. But how does evolution occur? Doesn't it occur from mutations?
Yeah.
So y'all have seen like X-Men, right? You know about X-Men? Yeah. Right? And so like you have all these people like randomly like in the population get these like super mutant powers, and it's like the next evolution. It's like they're like, right? But that's imaginary. Mm-hmm. It's not going to come from like I suddenly can like shoot lasers out my fucking asshole. It's like it's going to come from, which would be amazing. I'm totally signing up if that's a possibility. But what I'm saying is like we're the mutants. You see what I mean? Like, so that's what we're looking for is other people. We're not looking for if you got like 3 arms or something like that. We're saying, or you can jump over a building. We're saying, do you have that weird point within you that's like, I don't accept the way the world is. Like, and I can see beyond the fact that if I just try to rebel, it's just playing right into the hands of the people who are controlling everything anyways. But you're like, I want to change myself. Like for some reason, I don't know why, I never really wanted to go along with my position in life. There was something in there that was like, I want to do something different. Right. And that's really what we're looking for. So that's what I see it as. We're like the X people, right?
It's like this is not a thing about Drake or Asif or Mitchell or Cameron or Kian or whoever else. It's like, let this be the representation of the part of humanity that's like, oh, we can use our conscious to create something to program our unconscious. We have that process now.
Yes.
It is a manifestation of the evolution of mankind. That's why you should reach out. If you have objections and you're like, wait, I disagree with you guys, guess what? Depending on who you are, if you truly believe you're a good person and you want to do what's best, then you should connect on Facebook and object. Because there's 2 things that come from discussion. Well, one thing that comes from discussion. What's best? That's what it should be. And the way that manifests is either the person who had the objection's gone, it's like, okay, I see what you're saying now. Or the person who originally had the original theory, it's like they changed their theory, right? That fits in whatever is real. And so that's the value that you as a listener brings. If you're like, oh, these guys are saying some crazy shit. Some of it I agree with, so I keep listening, but there's some things that I'm like, whoa, you guys are reach out to us. Reach out to us, connect with us on Facebook and things like that, because
Tell them about the website.
self-perfected.com. You'll see the buttons there. We even have a contact form there. That's so dangerous. I love it. Who's getting those?
But we just
Mitchell,
delete
right?
those emails, right?
Yeah.
If you contact us that way, you just delete it anyway. So you want to go to the Facebook group, which you
The
can find through
Facebook
the
group
website.
is
Yeah,
where
that's a real
we'll.
spot.
That's where you
Facebook
can
group,
come troll us. Yeah.
Exactly. If you join the Facebook group, that's the perfect place to troll us, because there's questions that you have to answer to get in there. And that's where we see you're at least willing to be like, okay, I'm going to open Facebook. I'm going to search this group, or click on the link at the website, self-perfected.com. I'll join the group. I'll answer the questions. And that's all the level of commitment that we're saying.
Yeah. That's the troll toll.
In order to, the troll toll.
You got to pay the troll toll.
In order to converse, in order to give your objections, to at least show who you are.
Yeah.
Because if you care, then prove it.
Yeah.
You shouldn't be judged based off what you think. You shouldn't be judged based off what you say. You should be judged on what you do. So it's like, you could hate every fucking last one of us, right? You could join the group, fuck all these people, but what are you doing? And if what you're doing is better than what we have, please come.
Enlighten us.
We're waiting for you.
You know, okay, my last point real quick is, Mitch, when you mentioned that point about how you genuinely like yourself now, right? That point, and I'm just sharing this for everybody else.
I like you too
listening,
now.
Right? I liked you from the beginning. I don't know. But you know, I always said Mitch is like the Tony Robbins of self-perfection. You know? or he's like the what was the other one? Larry Ellison. It's like you're the combination of the two. I don't know why. But
when I first met you, I had lost my voice that weekend. It was the Ginny.
So you were like real, like raspy, like husky voice.
Yeah. That's funny.
And you made us walk across fire. I thought that was weird, but now I get.
Get us to clap our hands.
Yeah. Well, what I was going to say is that when I started to like myself was when I stopped giving into my excuses, because every time I would give into an excuse, I would judge myself. So like every time I would do something I knew wasn't best, when I could see what was, I would judge myself. So I realized ultimately, and it's like something I knew from the beginning of starting walking this process, but it's something I had to kind of in a visceral way realize for myself, like come to terms with really within myself, not just because someone else told me, was then stop fucking doing the stuff that isn't best, that you know you shouldn't do. But not just because your mom told you not to, or God told you not to, or some book or some video, or I told you, but because you see for yourself. So when I stopped doing those things, guess what? My life started to actually get better. And then the people around me started to become better, because it's like they weren't using me as an excuse anymore. And I started surrounding myself with people that were actually going where I was going. I was like, fuck, my life is actually pretty cool now. So I don't actually hate my life. Like, doesn't mean I'm totally satisfied where the world is at, but that's still actually a form of self-judgment. So at a certain point in this process, you start to really like yourself. So then you don't have that excuse anymore of like, well, the world can't be best for all because, I can't change. Like, no, you start to realize, oh, fuck. Oh, wow. If everybody was doing what I was doing, meaning walking the process, questioning themselves, changing themselves to not accept excuses anymore, then everybody would feel like they deserved a world that's best. And then there wouldn't be any reason not to. And then it becomes a point of when we have enough people, then we can actually start to influence the collective. That's really what this comes down to. Did Mitch, Drake, do you guys have any closing thoughts? No. Asif and I just said it all. All right.
I say let's do it.
I like it.
Let's do it. Like, we don't have much time.
Yeah.
It's like a countdown clock ticking. And
I actually know how much time we have. I'm just not telling anybody.
Yeah, good.
Shit.
All right. Thanks for the conversation, guys. We'll see everybody on the next one.
Yeah. Good to see you guys.
Bye.